Chapter 2738. Ning Shu thought she could leave after getting some star stones, but she still had to pick up trash. This, she didn't want to. I have to do a mission. The key was that she couldn't leave because she couldn't build a space tunnel to leave. Her heart was stuffed. She used to look forward to picking up trash. How did it become so bad? Ning Shu walked to the end of the team with the black bone umbrella. Sister wants to go back. I don't want to pick up anymore. Senior uncle built a space tunnel. Ning Shu stood at the entrance of the tunnel. And he waved at Ning Shu. What are you doing? Hurry up and follow me. Thank you so much for your kindness. Ning Shu walked into the space tunnel. This space tunnel was built very big. Jealousy made me unrecognizable. Ning Shu was jealous of all the people who could build space tunnels. Through the space tunnel, they arrived at the place where the plane was damaged. There was already an army controlling the situation of the plane. There were many fragments floating in the air. There were also large particles of dust. This kind of dust would hit the plane at a high speed. If it hit the plane, it would cause a big collision. It would cause the extinction of all the creatures in the plane. The most famous one was the extinction of the dinosaurs. They died in a big collision. A meteorite hit the ground and caused a huge impact. Originally, when the plane was damaged, everything in the plane would be annihilated into small particles due to the power of the explosion. These particles would drift to other planes. They would fall to the ground and merge with the soil. I've already collected the creatures in the plane. Now we need to find a world to store these creatures, a man said to Senior Uncle when he saw him. Senior Uncle nodded coldly. Just find someone to store them. Senior Uncle turned his head and saw Ning Shu at the end of the team. He raised his eyebrows. Yo, when did a little girl come to the team? She's willing to suffer this hardship. Ning Shu looked up and saw a gentle man. In the organization, Ning Shu had never seen such a gentle man. This man's eyebrows were gentle, gentler than a woman's. Ning Shu was used to the division of people in the organization. He felt that it was better not to jump to conclusions too early. One moment, they might look as gentle as water, but in the next moment, they might turn into medicine, 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 medicine. Check it out. Let's have a set of pancakes. He didn't come here on his own accord. He wanted to steal something, the Grand Elder said casually. Uncle Zhang smiled, giving off a warm feeling like spring. Which one of us came here willingly? This is Uncle Tai. He's a carpenter, the Grand Elder said to Ning Shu. Carpenter? Ning Shu immediately smiled and said, Hello, I'm Ning Shu. Those who were able to appear here were no small fries. Carpentry and whatnot were the same as prefect class prefects. Perhaps it was just a hobby of theirs. After all, prefect class prefects were also gardeners. Uncle Zhang looked at Ning Shu from head to toe. His gaze was fixed on the water droplet makeup between Ning Shu's eyebrows. Ning Shu touched the space between her eyebrows and said, Pretty, right? Uncle Zhang nodded. Not bad. Pretty. Ning Shu elbowed Fragrant Wind Man next to him and asked, Who is this big boss? All the weapons and props came from him and his subordinates, Fragrant Wind Man said. So this was what carpentry was all about. Ning Shu immediately gave Uncle Zhang, who was as gentle as water, 2 words, profiteer. Fuck. The gentler he smiled, the fiercer he was. Ning Shu asked again, Is he running the system exchange mall? He and the main system are running it, Fragrant Wind Man said. Why are you asking these questions? Didn't you see so many fragments? Hurry up and pick them up. What are you chatting about? Ning Shu glanced at him in disdain. He took the trash bag and glanced at Uncle Zhang, who was talking to the Grand Elder. Uncle Zhang's department should be very rich. There were so many props. In addition to the system exchange mall, there were also merchants in the virtual space and the law space. If they needed to buy goods, they would look for them. Fuck. There was a big fat sheep to be plucked, but they caught the poor mission enforcers and took their wool. Were they stupid? Those props were so expensive. Wouldn't it be better to collect more taxes? Why did they catch mission enforcers and exploit them? Just the umbrella in her hand was 50,000 merit points. If she relied on missions, she wouldn't have so many merit points. Ning Shu basically didn't get much merit points from doing missions. If he didn't have some savings, he might not even be able to afford an umbrella. Uncle Zhang turned to look at Ning Shu. Why are you staring at me with such resentful eyes? I owe you money. Ning Shu shook his head. No. Uncle Zhang smiled, said a few words to the Grand Elder, and left in a flash. Ning Shu picked up a fragment with a star stone inlaid on it. He hurriedly wanted to put it away and get the star stone when he went back. In fact, it didn't matter whether he got it or not. Anyway, if he threw it down, the virtual law could swallow anything. Plain fragments were a piece of cake. Ning Shu stuffed the fragment into the meson space and looked around. Seeing that no one was paying attention to him, he breathed a sigh of relief and began to pick up the trash like a dog playing in the snow. The trash bag had a lot of space. It looked no different from an ordinary trash bag, but it could hold a lot of fragments. Ning Shu was proud. He grabbed the fragments and threw them into the bag. His hands were nimble and quick. The sooner he finished, the sooner he would be liberated. He thought that he would be done after picking up once, but he didn't expect to have to pick up more. Moreover, picking up trash was quite boring. There wasn't much skill involved. He picked up the trash and threw it into the trash bag. He used to think that picking up trash was extremely difficult, but now he felt, it was very boring. Ning Shu felt like he was now a worker on an assembly line, doing the same actions. After filling a bag, Ning Shu tied the bag and continued to pick up. This time, 2 planes were broken. One plane was very big and would produce countless fragments. In fact, he didn't need to care about these fragments. However, if he didn't clean them up, it would be like leaving scissors and gauze in the body. Granduncle glanced at the happy Ning Shu and took out the fragment inlaid with the star stone from her meson space. He dealt with the star stone on it and then put the fragment back into her meson space. Ning Shu was still like a mad dog. She didn't notice anything. Of course, with her little power of space law, she couldn't notice that someone had built a space passage and taken away her meson space star stone. Fragrant Wind looked at Ning Shu with some pity. Stupid. Ning Shu walked past like a gust of wind. Ning Shu stuffed the fragments she passed into the trash bag. She saw that Granduncle had dealt with another mountain-like star stone. The star stone was shining so brightly that it was almost blinding. Her legs couldn't help but walk toward the star stone. Anyway, she had already obtained a fragment, and the star stone on it was not small. She had already obtained a fragment, and the star stone on it was not small. A panel appeared in front of Granduncle. It seemed that someone had sent him a message. And you take care of this, Granduncle said to Fragrant Wind. Fragrant Wind was commanding the army to fix the plane. Hearing Granduncle's words, he nodded. Then Granduncle disappeared. Chapter 2739. And he began to deal with the star stones on the fragments. Ning Shu immediately walked over and touched the star stones. And he said irritably, "Are you that hungry? Don't make trouble for me. If there's less of this, I'll be the one eating." Anyway, he doesn't know how much there is here, Ning Shu said. Fragrant Wind Man looked at her expressionlessly. Even if I scan my memory, I can remember where there are fragments. He can't remember. When the time comes to connect the planes, you'll get some scraps and annoy people for no reason. Don't you think you're annoying? I'm asking you, don't you think you're annoying? Ning Shu asked while picking up the trash. You can deal with star stones too? Fragrant Wind Man glanced at Ning Shu. I find that you're a very talkative person. Don't talk to me. Ning Shu saw that Fragrant Wind Man was so irritable that smoke was about to come out of his head. Who was the talkative one? Ning Shu went to pick up the trash. If he didn't want to talk, then so be it. Fragrant Wind Man was obviously not very good at this kind of delicate work. He was slow to process, and some of the star stones on the fragments were not cleaned. At this time, someone with obsessive-compulsive disorder needed to remind him. The fragments made by Fragrant Wind Man were obviously different from those made by Senior Grand Uncle. Senior Grand Uncle's fragments were scraped clean. Obsessive-compulsive disorder. Fragrant Wind Man's fragments had a shallow layer of star stones on them. Ning Shu asked, You don't need these fragments, right? There were still some star stones on them. Although there weren't many little drops made an ocean. It could be considered a very large star stone. Fragrant Wind Man cursed, Didn't I tell you to go away? Ning Shu was speechless. Ning Shu picked up the fragments. He was too lazy to care about the irritable and he just stayed by the side. After he dealt with the star stones on them, he put away the fragments with the remaining star stones. The plain wall was actually not thick. If it was really thick, there wouldn't be so many transmigrators. And his head was sweating. Ning Shu couldn't help but say, Slow down. I'd rather fuck someone than do this, and he couldn't help but say. Fuck. It didn't take long for the Grand Elder to return. And he let out a long sigh and hurriedly left. Ning Shu also dragged the garbage bag and left. If he followed he could still get some leftovers, but Senior Grand Uncle, forget it. If he could make it clean, the shards could be used as mirrors. The Grand Uncle glanced around. Where are the fragments you dealt with? And he immediately pointed at Ning Shu. She took it away. Ning Shu was speechless. And this fellow, really did not have the demeanor of a soldier at all. Where was his unyielding spirit? The first thing he did was to shift the blame. Fuck your sister. Ning Shu said directly, I saw that he didn't clean it up, and there were still some star stones left on it, so I put the pieces away. Come on, let's hurt each other. The Grand Elder glanced at the two of them and looked at he sharply. You're using this method to benefit her. That's not it. Ning Shu retorted. He was the one who didn't handle it cleanly. Impossible. Am I that kind of person? And he also retorted. He had always handled it this way, and that little star stones were insignificant. It was just a thin little bit. Only that fellow was so vicious that he wouldn't let go of such a small amount of star stones. The Grand Elder did not ask Ning Shu to hand over the fragments and continue to deal with the star stones. Ning Shu scampered away to pick up the trash. Next was connecting the planes. Ning Shu caught a few drops of fist-sized star stones. He rushed to the next location. Ning Shu carried his waist. How long would it take? Again and again. Was he going to pick it up until the end of time? She had to go back to do the mission. She had to go back to comprehend the space laws. She had to go back to see the world of reincarnation. Was the reincarnation pool going to give birth to another disaster beast? She had a lot of things to do. Even Ning Shu felt a little tired. The other big shots also slowed down their speed of picking up the trash. Although the plane fragments were not heavy, after picking them up hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of times, they could no longer feel their existence. After the Grand Elder dealt with the star stones, he would also pick up the fragments in the trash bag. His speed was neither fast nor slow. He picked them up at a constant speed. He didn't look tired at all. After the plane fragments were inlaid, he went to the next place. Ning Shu already wanted to lie on the ground. The life of picking up trash that she longed for should not be so unbearable. Ning Shu asked the Grand Elder directly, "I'm exhausted. When will it end?" The Grand Elder said, "When this is dealt with and the next batch of people is changed, you can go." Ning Shu was a little more energetic. She picked up the trash with the bag. Before, she moved like a crazy rabbit. Now, she just wanted to be a motionless fairy. Fortunately, this was the last one. Everyone also needed to rest, although they were souls. Ning Shu looked at the other big shots who were picking up the trash. They all looked tired. Ning Shu breathed a sigh of relief. She thought she was the only one who felt a little tired. The others were also tired. Ning Shu felt less lonely. Everyone's speed of picking up the trash slowed down. In the end, most of the remaining fragments were picked up by the Grand Elder alone. And they were all relatively large fragments. It was not so tiring to carry the small fragments. Everyone picked up the small fragments. Perhaps it was because of the wood laws that Ning Shu felt tired, but it was still within the limits of what she could bear. After finishing, the Grand Elder said to everyone, "Go back and apply for the reward from the main system." "Okay. Got it." The big shots who were picking up the trash responded sparsely. Then Ning Shu sadly found that the big shots around her disappeared in an instant, leaving her here alone. She was so lonely. The Grand Elder looked at her condescendingly. "If you don't go, keep picking." In the face of his condescending gaze, Ning Shu could only comfort herself. Everyone couldn't raise their heads in front of her. They all had to look down at her. Without learning how to build a space channel, they couldn't go back. Ning Shu looked at He. Did this guy have any self-awareness? Her reward for working so hard was all his. The Grand Elder opened the chat system. Obviously, he was contacting someone. He probably wanted to find someone to pick up the trash. "I'm leaving. I'll give you the reward when I go back," Ning Shu said to He. And he nodded and made a space channel. Ning Shu ran away. She felt that picking up trash still needed to be carefully considered. It was not like picking up trash once was enough. She would tire herself to death before changing to the next batch. She naively thought that picking up trash for a while was enough. Last time, he probably saw that she was useless standing there, so he let her go. Back in the system space, Ning Shu lay on the sofa and opened the chat system to apply for the reward for picking up trash from the main system. She didn't know how much the reward was. Not long after the application, she was notified that 50,000 merit points had been credited. 50,000. Ning Shu stood up from the sofa directly. Half of the reward was deducted. So, it was 100,000 merit points. Ning Shu suddenly felt her heart ache. Should she give 50,000 merit points to Fragrant Wind? What should she do if she suddenly regretted it? Chapter 2740. When Ning Shu was still struggling between money and character, Fragrant Wind sent a message asking her to pay. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. Ning Shu was speechless. She had no choice but to pay. It was only 50,000 merit points. She had plenty of money. Luckily, it wasn't 100,000. Luckily, half of it was deducted. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to bear it. Now that she knew that she could pick up fragments, she wouldn't lack stellar stones in the future. Rather than spending a few 100,000 to buy stellar stones from Fragrant Wind, she might as well pick up trash occasionally and get some scraps. In this way, 50,000 merit points really weren't much. Although Ning Shu gave him the money readily, she couldn't help but mock him. "Are you so poor? You're chasing after such a small amount of money." "Fragrant Wind, what can I do? I'm so desperate. You're only giving me a small amount of military funds. I have to think of other ways to make my soldiers better. I need money for all kinds of rewards and punishments. When Ning Shu heard him say that, she couldn't mock him anymore. She could only laugh it off. Since he had already said so, what else could she say? He was indeed quite poor. And those souls were the same as the bones of an abyssal prefect. They needed merit points to build the golden body of merit and strengthen their souls. Merit points should be the most indestructible and sturdy existence. How much money would it take to build such a huge army? TSK TSK TSK. Next time, if you want to pick up trash, look for me. Fragrant Wind, who received the money, said straightforwardly. Ning Shu rolled her eyes. Picking up trash was so tiring, yet she still had to pay Fragrant Wind. She was asking for a beating. If it wasn't for a few stellar stones, would she have to be so miserable? Ning Shu closed the chat system and took the Messen space into the peerless martial arts. She threw the space fragments one by one into the law of nothingness. The fragments were directly swallowed and assimilated by the law of nothingness. However, the stellar stones could contain the law of nothingness. She remembered that she took a stellar stone with a big inlaid surface. It was secretly stuffed into the Messen space. Ning Shu looked around and found that the piece was gone. There was only a fragment that was very clean. There wasn't even a speck of stellar stone on it. It was so clean. Apart from the judge, it couldn't be someone with obsessive-compulsive disorder. Was this a scam? Not only did he take it, he even put the scraped pieces back into her Messen space. Ning Shu expressionlessly threw the shard into the law of nothingness. She actually thought that she had succeeded. What kind of perverted mentality was this? She was happy for nothing. Ning Shu took out the ruby ring and shot a few rays of time at the law of nothingness. However, the surface of the law of nothingness did not even ripple. Ning Shu sighed and sat down, leaning on the big star stone. He even used a small bottle of soul origin to buy this thing. Ning Shu touched the water droplet between his eyebrows. This was his biggest gain this time. No matter what, as he grew stronger and stronger, he would have more and more things. Ning Shu raised his hand and looked at the law of wood imprint between his thumb and forefinger. The water droplets had already disappeared. He wondered if this thing had any other uses other than picking up trash. Ning Shu pointed at the law of nothingness. I'll deal with you sooner or later. Her world had been repaired. Once she dealt with the law of nothingness, her world would return to normal. By then, she would be a person with a world. Ning Shu lifted her dress and returned to the system space. She took the black bone umbrella and opened the black hole to enter the world of reincarnation. Ning Shu really wanted to tie the dress around her waist. It was too dirty. Especially in the world of reincarnation, the ground was filled with sand and dust. The Thunder Qilin used its fat butt to block the hole, making Ning Shu speechless. She felt that this fellow was blocking her. After entering the world of reincarnation, Ning Shu held the black bone umbrella and walked to the reincarnation pool. Beside the reincarnation pool, black flowers bloomed. They swayed in the wind and gave off a mesmerizing fragrance. It was the smell of happiness. It attracted souls to jump into the reincarnation pool. Li Si sat beside the reincarnation pool. When he saw Ning Shu, he did not dare to recognize her. Great Aunt. Ning Shu nodded. What's wrong? Li Si was speechless. Was Great Aunt addicted to changing clothes? She changed clothes for fun. Souls couldn't be changed, right? Since young master died, he had been wearing the same clothes. However, Great Aunt seemed different from normal souls. Ning Shu asked, are there any calamity beasts? Li Si shook his head. No, there is no movement. I don't see any. Then, are there many souls that jump in? Li Si hesitated and said, what is a lot and what is a little? He did not know what the standard was. Sometimes, there would be no souls jumping in for a long time. Sometimes, they would jump in a bunch. He really did not know what was a lot and what was a little. Ning Shu took out 2 merit grains and passed it to him. Guard it well. Li Si hurriedly took the gold nugget. After eating it, he felt his body become lighter. It was definitely something good. Ning Shu instructed, guard it well. If there is anything, inform me immediately. Especially when calamity beasts are born. Li Si said seriously, I will remember. Ning Shu was not worried about Li Si. In the future, Li Si would definitely be part of the Bone Army. If she started to nurture him now, she would feed him a merit grain. She did not expect him to start killing calamity beasts. But the problem was that she could not afford to feed him. If she nurtured an army of 100 million like Excellency, how much money would she need? The merit grains would probably fill up her law ocean. So scary, so scary. She only wanted to nurture a few bones that could kill calamity beasts. Moreover, when killing calamity beasts, she would need to consume faith power. Oh my God! Ning Shu hugged his head. He had a huge family but he was so poor. Now, it was just a reincarnation world. If there was another world beside it that formed a reincarnation world, he would need even more skeletons. Ning Shu's face turned green. Damn, where would he get money? When there was no world, he racked his brains for a world. Now that there was a world, more things came out. After leaving the reincarnation world, Ning Shu went to the 4th level. Walking on the streets, he saw all kinds of beastmen and humans. What was the 5th level like? Ning Shu wanted to enter the 5th level but he could not. What was the meaning of this? Rejecting her, not allowing her to enter the 5th level before she settled the 4th level. Ning Shu felt like he was the groom. He had to pass many tests before he could win the heart of the beauty. If he was not allowed to enter, then so be it. Did you think that he wanted to enter? There was no benefit at all. Speaking of which, Ning Shu picked up all the benefits in the 3 levels below. The soul stone on the 1st level even formed a reincarnation world. The soul fluid on the 2nd level, there were even some people who were secretly refining soul fluid. For this, for a period of time, she still had soul fluid. When the time came, she would go and harvest it. It was like harvesting leeks. She even had a disciple to help her. The 3rd level contained living beings. She obtained 20 million merit points and successfully comprehended the laws. /BK Chapter 2741. He hadn't seen the benefits of the 4th level yet, so he didn't know what they were. What kind of world would the 5th level be? If the 9 Palace Mountain was used as a training ground, then none of the disciples sent in by the sects would be able to leave. The big shots of the immortal cultivation sects were probably waiting for their disciples to come out. Ning Shu returned to the system space and took the letter, ready to comprehend the law of space. He had already comprehended the rules, so there was no reason for him to be stuck on the law of space. While he was excited, he might be able to comprehend the law of space. Even if he wanted to pick up trash, he didn't want to give the reward to others. Now punishing 664, he will be subjected to the astral wind for 10,000 years before being killed. The main system sent another message. Ning Shu looked at it and felt that the organization had gone crazy. The previous one and this one were both big shots. Not only did they get rid of one, they got rid of another one. What were they trying to do? These big shots should have built a world of living beings, why were they still killed? Ning Shu asked 2333, even mission enforcers of this level are killed? How big of a crime was this? Torture them for 10,000 years before being killed. 2333 said, I think he crossed the line. He crossed the line. But there are living beings in the world. If the person who built the world dies, the world won't be able to protect it. They were connected by fate. 2333 said, what's the big deal? It's just the living beings in the world. If they were transferred to another world, then the mission enforcer's world would be empty. An empty world, if it's destroyed, then so be it. There was no psychological burden to kill. Ning Shu was speechless. Fuck, as the saying goes, 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 as long as the priest is 1 foot tall, the devil is 10 feet tall. So what if there are living beings in your world? If you go overboard and transfer the living beings away, then the world will explode and the people will be killed. Ning Shu shrunk his neck, so even if I built a world, I might not be killed. The only thing that is certain in this world is that everything is changing. There is nothing certain in this world. It can only be said that mission enforcers who have constructed worlds have more freedom and resources than normal mission enforcers. They won't be killed over trivial matters. But if you go overboard, the punishment will be much crueler than normal mission enforcers. Ordinary mission enforcers would be killed in an instant, but these mission enforcers would first taste the torture of tens of thousands of years before being killed. Being stripped of everything, was even more painful than being tortured for tens of thousands of years. Ning Shu is so scared that he's scared like a dog. I'm going to make sure these people can't punish him in the future. Forget it. I'll just go and comprehend the laws of space. Ning Shu took these people's punishments as a warning, but he didn't feel anything else. Because they didn't know each other. Not to sympathize with how pitiful. Ding dong, the chat system sounded again. The sudden sound made Ning Shu's heart clench. Recently, he had heard this voice too many times, and he was a little traumatized. Usually, nothing good would happen, and good things would never happen to her. Not wanting to look, Ning Shu's finger obediently opened the chat system. Again, the main system sent over. Main system, congratulations on becoming a beginner volunteer. There will be 3 volunteer activities a month. Please participate on time. Ning Shu. Volunteer? What is this, what is this? Ning Shu asked the main system. The main system's answer made Ning Shu's kidneys explode. Main system, it's to deal with the trash of the plane fragments. Every month, every volunteer has to do it 3 times a month. This is mandatory, dear. Ning Shu covered his ears. I didn't hear it, Ning Shu asked, who are the volunteers? Main system, everyone who has comprehended the laws is a volunteer. Although they are volunteers, they are still paid. Ning Shu shook his legs. Why was it completely different from what he imagined? It didn't look like it at all. Ning Shu realized very hopelessly that comprehending the laws would only make his time even more crowded. There were also 3 volunteer activities a month to pick up trash. This was different from what they had agreed on. Different. Ning Shu struggled. I still have to do missions. A month will have passed by the time I come back from a mission. The main system said coldly, you can accumulate. After you finish the mission, just finish the accumulated work. Ning Shu, no, I don't, Ning Shu struggled. I haven't comprehended the law of space. I can't go to the plane. Main system, it doesn't matter. Someone will build a space channel. Ning Shu, in the past, when he wanted to pick up trash, he ran into a wall everywhere. Now that he didn't want to, it was mandatory. Go away, all of you. Anyway, she had been blacklisted by the senior uncle. If she couldn't go, she would say that she couldn't go because she couldn't contact him. Ning Shu opened the chat interface with the senior uncle and suddenly found that the blacklisting status had been lifted. So, the other party could receive a message if she sent it over. You really should have blacklisted me for 20 years. Don't remove the blacklisting status so quickly. How immoral. Ning Shu moved her fingers, took a deep breath, and then gracefully blacklisted the senior uncle. This way, he wouldn't be able to contact her and she wouldn't have to pick up trash. She didn't know how to build a space channel. It was forcing her to pick up trash. Awesome. Although he was deceiving himself and others, he was deceiving himself. Ning Shu took the letter to comprehend the law of space. Suddenly, she felt no pressure at all. It didn't matter. After comprehending the law of space, she had to do volunteer work every month. There was no pressure at all. She could comprehend as much as she could. She was going to build a space channel now. The space channel she built was very short, only a meter or so, and it wasn't big. Other people's were big, long, and stable. The space channel she built was very unstable and could collapse at any time. It was like a bubble. It might burst with a little force. She was also comprehending the law of space. Ning Shu felt that the law of space she comprehended might be fake. Why was it so different from others? So different. Ning Shu flipped through the letter. She might have bought a pirated textbook. Ning Shu tore the letter. She felt that with the letter, it was as if it had drawn a circle for her and she was wandering in this circle. She couldn't help but want to read the letter. What she tore was not a book, but merit. She had spent 100,000 merit points to buy this handwritten letter. Without the handwritten letter, there was no longer any restrictions. Without anyone to rely on, Ning Shu's heart became much more relaxed. She could comprehend it however she wanted. It was all her own anyway. Referring to others would always be limited to other people's thoughts and thoughts. Ning Shu began to build a space channel and practiced lengthening it. Moreover, it had to be a stable space channel that couldn't be easily destroyed. Chapter 2742. Although Ning Shu could build a spatial tunnel, it was not sturdy at all. Although it had grown compared to before, Ning Shu walked in the spatial tunnel by herself. The spatial tunnel collapsed without giving her any face. Building a spatial tunnel was like weaving a fishing net, tying knots one by one to connect the spatial nodes. Obviously, Ning Shu's fishing net was not sturdy at all. Ning Shu had no choice. Since she did not explain, with so many knots and densely connected spatial nodes, it would be much sturdier. However, it would take a long time to build a spatial tunnel like this. Others could build a spatial tunnel in an instant, but she needed a long time. Even if she went to pick up trash in the future, she would still painstakingly build a spatial tunnel after everyone else had left. Was there some sort of trick involved in this? Ning Shu pulled her hair. It was simply making her bald. Why was spatial law so difficult to comprehend? She was really not good at this. She was already very serious and focused on it. She spent a long time, but her progress was slow in this aspect. Even if Ning Shu repeatedly felt that she could do it, she had to admit that she really did not have any talent. Building a spatial tunnel consumed a lot of mental energy. After a while, Ning Shu was already dizzy and could not continue building a spatial tunnel. Her mental energy was exhausted. Ning Shu was angry and ruthless. Even if she felt uncomfortable, she forced herself to endure. Her mental energy had also reached a bottleneck. Sometimes, it was not enough at all. If she really wanted to build a spatial tunnel in the future, she would need spatial nodes. She would use spatial power to connect the spatial nodes. If she did not have enough mental energy, she would have to stop halfway and give up halfway. As her mental energy was exhausted, Ning Shu felt her head hurt more and more. That feeling of emptiness was as if her soul was about to be exhausted. It was especially uncomfortable and uncomfortable. Although there was a trace of coolness from the wood law to relieve her fatigue, the feeling of emptiness in her soul could not be relieved. Her soul hurt as if it was about to be torn apart. Ning Shu had to stop this self-abuse. It hurt a little. She dragged her tired body back to the system space and lay on the sofa without moving. After a while, from between her eyebrows, there was a slightly warm and comfortable flow from between her eyebrows to every corner of her body. The pain of her soul being torn apart was alleviated a lot. Ning Shu touched his forehead. This was the power of the water droplet. As for the rules of life, Ning Shu did not know what they could do. Other than picking up trash, how could he find that they could relieve fatigue? Ning Shu clicked on the system exchange store to see if there were any items that could expand his mental strength. Her current spiritual power was clearly insufficient, and she was struggling to construct the spatial tunnel. She also wanted to be able to construct a sturdy spatial passageway in an instant. It was large and sturdy. In the future, if they really connected the fourth level of the Nine Palace Mountain to the world of reincarnation, what if the spatial passageway wasn't sturdy enough? What if something went wrong midway? Furthermore, if it wasn't safe, who knew if he would encounter spatial cracks and spatial storms when he used the spatial passageway in the future? Especially when picking up trash, when traveling between planes, it was very likely that he would be swept away by the spatial storm until nothing was left. This was a very serious matter. Ning Shu didn't dare to be careless. Ning Shu looked through the system exchange store, but he couldn't find any way to expand his mental strength. Was there no such item? Ning Shu asked the system exchange store's customer service staff if there was such an item. The customer service staff very apologetically told Ning Shu that there was basically no item for this type of mental strength cultivation. Even if there was an item, it could only increase one's mental strength to a certain extent. In fact, it was equivalent to a person holding a knife. Their combat strength increased, but their physical strength didn't increase much. Most of the strength was increased by the knife. Ning Shu wanted to strengthen himself, and not rely on an item to increase his mental strength. Ning Shu wanted to search for ways to increase his mental strength, and there were all kinds of answers. However, Ning Shu found out about the state of his mental strength. There was a mental strength the size of a soybean in his sea of consciousness, and all his mental strength came from this bean. As his mental strength varied, the size of the mental strength in his sea of consciousness varied. Some were very small, some were the size of a soccer ball, and the more powerful ones were the size of a lake, and the lake was filled with mental strength. This was the development from a solid state to a liquid state, and the more powerful ones, the mental strength ball could form a universe. In short, the bigger the mental strength ball, the better, and the liquid one was better than the solid one. However, there wasn't a single accurate description of the specific cultivation method. This kind of mission enforcers forum discussed all kinds of random things, including mission strategies and all kinds of secrets. It was classified as entertainment, and there wasn't much real information. Not everyone wanted to openly share their cultivation experience. Therefore, although Ning Shu knew the state of mental strength, he didn't know how to specifically turn mental strength from a solid state to a liquid state. Ning Shu sank into his sea of consciousness and looked for his mental strength ball. Then he found the mental strength ball and suspended it in his sea of consciousness. Ning Shu found that although his mental strength ball wasn't as small as a soybean, it was only the size of a ping-pong ball. It was really small, and it was suspended in his sea of consciousness pitifully. Ning Shu was speechless. He felt that his mental strength wasn't enough every time. It turned out that his mental strength ball was so small. It was really too pitiful. But how to make his mental strength ball bigger? From a ping-pong ball to a soccer ball, to the earth, to the universe. From a solid state to a liquid state, from a water droplet to a vast ocean. He was so blind. He didn't know how to cultivate. There didn't seem to be any secret manuals that could cultivate mental strength. Ning Shu went through the exchange store page by page, looking for secret manuals. He hoped that he could find a cultivation secret manual. After browsing for a while, he found a secret manual that cost 150,000 merit points. Ning Shu exchanged for it without thinking. Money wasn't a problem. He urgently needed to improve his mental strength now. Ning Shu bought the secret manual as if he had found a treasure. Then, he flipped it open. However, the content inside made Ning Shu petrified. Because the cultivation secret manual only had one sentence, keep attacking your mental strength ball. Ning Shu was speechless. 150,000 merit points to buy a few words. This was really worth 1,000 gold per word. Was it useful to keep attacking the mental strength ball in his sea of consciousness? Ning Shu prepared himself and used his consciousness to attack the mental strength ball. The mental strength ball moved a little, but Ning Shu's whole body was in so much pain that he fell to the ground. It felt like a very thick needle was stuck into his brain, and then he kept stirring his brain. It was so painful. It was so painful. Was this a cultivation method? It was obviously self-torture. Chapter 2743. Ning Shu lay on the ground weakly. She reached out to grab the secret manual on the coffee table and flipped through it while lying on the ground. Because it was too painful, Ning Shu saw double as she read the words. In short, this cultivation method was to stimulate the spiritual ball appropriately. The spiritual ball would automatically defend itself and slowly strengthen. However, it couldn't be overstimulated or cultivated, or it would completely collapse. Then, it would cause the annihilation of the soul. This cultivation method was very painful at the beginning, but the pain would gradually weaken. Ning Shu directly threw the secret manual to the ground. This was a scam. This wasn't cultivation, this was self-mutilation. It was too painful. It was just a slight stimulation, but Ning Shu felt that her soul was trembling. It was too painful. She couldn't take it. Moreover, Ning Shu was very afraid that her spiritual ball would collapse just like that. At that time, she wouldn't be able to use any spiritual power. Without spiritual power, how was she going to build a spatial tunnel? This pain was still fresh in her memory. For the time being, Ning Shu didn't dare to stimulate it again. Ning Shu rested for a while. A warm current flowed out from between her eyebrows, nourishing her soul and alleviating the pain of her brain exploding. Slowly, the pain lessened. So this water droplet was used as a painkiller? Everyone was afraid of pain. Now that this water droplet had such an effect, Ning Shu was of course very happy. When the pain was completely alleviated, Ning Shu was eager to try again. She lightly stimulated the spiritual ball. However, in an instant, Ning Shu felt as if a heavy hammer had smashed her head. Her soul hurt as if it had been smashed open. If not for the fact that she was in a soul state, Ning Shu would have already spat out a mouthful of blood. Ning Shu hugged her head and rolled on the ground. It was so painful. The water droplet between her eyebrows shone slightly, alleviating the pain in Ning Shu's body. Ning Shu really didn't dare to stimulate the spiritual ball too frequently. If she did, the spiritual ball would explode, and she might become a wandering soul without thoughts. Ning Shu was in so much pain that her whole body trembled. She curled up into a ball and overestimated her endurance. This pain was due to the counterattack of the spiritual sphere. If something were to harm it, the spiritual sphere would automatically defend itself, but the pain it caused to its owner was unimaginable. Ning Shu felt unwell all over. At this moment, the chatting system rang. Ning Shu rolled his eyes. In the past, the chatting system never rang. Now, it was ringing all the time. Furthermore, it was definitely not a good thing to look for him. I'm in a lot of pain right now. I don't want to know who sent me the message. Ning Shu waited until the pain had completely disappeared and he felt more comfortable before opening the chat system. The person who sent the message was her uncle whom she had met once. The meaning was very simple. He wanted her to buy a drop of the source of life. Ning Shu had no choice but to investigate what the source of life was. It should be the liquid born from the water droplets. Was he asking her to sell her blood? Sister's body is weak now, so I won't sell my blood. Ning Shu did some research and found that the source of life was the power born from the law of life. To put it bluntly, it was a liquid that contained the aura of life. Ning Shu, I don't have it now. I can't sell it. If he guessed correctly, the warm current that gushed out of the painful water droplets should be the source of life. Her uncle looked very gentle and easy to talk to. Then when can you sell it? I heard that you've only comprehended the law of life not long ago. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask me. The other party was so neither soft nor hard that Ning Shu couldn't refuse. In a while. You know that I've only comprehended the law of life not long ago, so there are some things I need to familiarize myself with. He asked again, what do you want this for? Uncle, of course it's a prop. You can set the price. From his tone, it seemed that his uncle was very rich, very rich. Ning Shu said reservedly, okay, when I want to sell it, I'll sell it. Sell it? Why did this sound so ambiguous? Ning Shu thought again. If he was really short of money, could he sell the source of life? It felt a bit like selling his kidney. In short, Ning Shu felt that in the future, he wouldn't be so short of money that he had nowhere to go. Ning Shu was quite happy in his heart. So when he was strong, there would be a steady stream of resources. Ahaha. The chat system rang again. Ning Shu stared at the person who sent the message. It was actually Senior Uncle. Senior Uncle, have you rested enough? You can come over now. Ning Shu, hadn't she already blocked him? How could this person still send her a message? She didn't see it. Ning Shu closed the chat system. I didn't see anything. This kind of person had the help of the main system. He could block others, but no one could block him. She had clearly blocked him, but he didn't expect to still be able to contact her. She could still see his messages. I'm begging you to block me and ignore me. The chat system rang again. Ning Shu said to 2333, I'm going to do a mission. As he spoke, he opened the system exchange store and exchanged for some basic medicine and fasting pills. 2333 said, you'd better see what he said. The main system can check whether you have done a mission or not. Ning Shu rolled his eyes and opened the chat system. It was still him. Ning Shu couldn't help but ask, didn't I just pick it up? Why are you still looking for me? Senior Uncle, because you picked it up quickly. Ning Shu, was she too active, so they caught her and made her work? Ning Shu shrugged. Exterminate me. The hairs on his back stood on end. He felt as if he was being watched, and his hair stood on end. Ning Shu didn't want such praise at all. He said directly, I'm going to do a mission. Senior Uncle, you haven't done a mission yet. Come here, the organization needs you. No, don't flatter me. Everything wanted her to do manual labor. She was obviously being pulled into the role of a strong man. I'm tired. I just picked it up. Senior Uncle, just come here. I won't let you die of exhaustion. I'll keep you alive. Ning Shu, should I thank you? Besides, she was a soul. She didn't need to breathe at all. There was no such thing as keeping her alive. Ning Shu didn't intend to go, but a space channel appeared in front of him. Ning Shu had a little calculation in his heart. He stepped into the space channel and walked for a long time to reach the broken plane. At first glance, there were fragments floating everywhere. How many planes had collapsed? Why were there so many fragments? If it was a plane, there wouldn't be so many fragments at all. It felt like the plane had exploded like firecrackers. There were obviously many more big shots picking up garbage than before. So this was an emergency. Ning Shu didn't say anything. He picked up the garbage bag and began to pick up the fragments. There were so many. How long would it take? And to pick up the fragments, he had to pick up the fragments close to other planes first. Otherwise, this kind of fragment was very likely to rush into other planes. Ning Shu was now in high spirits. It didn't take him any effort to pick up the garbage, and he was also very fast. Chapter 27:44. She pulled the garbage bag with one hand and kept picking up pieces with the other. Sometimes, she would grab 2 or 3 pieces and stuff them in. Ning Shu came back to her senses. Was it because she was too enthusiastic that she was pulled in as a strong person? But in this case, of course, she had to pick up as many pieces as she could. Otherwise, these pieces would rush into other planes. With the water droplets, she could relieve herself when she was tired and in pain. Damn, was she going to become a perpetual motion machine? Working non-stop. There were at least a few hundred big bosses who came to pick up the garbage this time. It sounded like a lot, but compared to the huge number of mission enforcers, these people were not many. Every time they picked up the garbage, they relied on mission enforcers who had comprehended the rules. It was said to be volunteer work, but it was obviously forced work. In the future, they would not only have to do missions. Mission enforcers did missions. It was a must. It was their job. Now, they had to pick up the pieces. Was there really no tool that could deal with this garbage at once? It felt quite stifling. If they relied on manual labor to pick up the pieces one by one, how long would it take? Ning Shu stuffed the pieces into the garbage bag as he approached Granduncle and asked, "How many planes have collapsed this time?" Granduncle said indifferently, 18. Fuck, 18. Why did so many of them collapse? More than a dozen. Wasn't the banging like firecrackers? Granduncle dealt with the star stones quickly. There were a lot of star stones in more than a dozen planes. It's too late. Granduncle frowned. Ning Shu didn't ask any more questions. Fragrant Wind was furious, and his face was extremely ugly. This kind of plane patrol was the army's job. This time, more than a dozen planes had collapsed. It was a very serious accident. Fragrant Wind was probably going to be criticized. Ning Shu picked up the garbage faster. When embedding the planes, he could pick up more scraps. And many star stones couldn't be used. More than a dozen planes had collapsed. To link the planes, he only needed star stones from 1 or 2 planes. There were still so many left. Ning Shu's heart was burning. When the time came, he could get more. Ning Shu's heart was full of motivation. He picked up the garbage faster and faster. His hands even left afterimages. Everyone, thought what a fierce girl. While laughing, he picked up the trash like crazy. Was it that fun to pick up fragments? Merit points could not tempt Ning Shu, let alone these big shots. They did not care about 100,000 merit points at all. They came here with the intention of completing the mission, so it was impossible to say that they were enthusiastic. However, there was no one like Ning Shu, who was running around like a butterfly. Was it because he had never picked up a shard before? Was that why he was so excited? All the bosses expressed their understanding. After a long time, they wouldn't be so excited anymore. Although it was said that picking up spatial fragments was high and mighty, to them, it felt like picking up plastic bottles every day. When Ning Shu felt a little tired, the wood laws and the water droplets would flow out, making her feel invigorated. Ning Shu continued to pick up like this. After picking up several bags, he tied them up. Then, he took another bag and ran around to pick up the pieces. Normally, they would carry 2 other bags. Fragments with the power of laws would be placed in one bag, and ordinary fragments would be placed in the other. Different fragments were placed in different positions and could not be mixed together. In fact, they were just sorting the trash. With everyone's efforts, the floating fragments became fewer and fewer. However, everyone was quite tired. They slowed down, and Ning Shu was not as fast as before. Although these fragments were not heavy, after a long time, it was very tiring. And his face was dark all the time. When Ning Shu passed by him, he would take a detour. The fragrant and he was now emitting a gloomy aura. Whoever went near him would be unlucky. Ning Shu did not want to go up there and look for trouble. Of course, Ning Shu was still a little gloating in his heart. The heavens were clear. Let's see who will be spared. And he saw that every time Ning Shu passed by him, he was like a little mouse, slipping away and disappearing. Why, was he hated by everyone now? And his face became even darker. This was more or less a blatant mockery. The boss was in a bad mood, causing the atmosphere of the army to also be gloomy. No one dared to speak. No matter what, the army had failed in their duty this time. Ning Shu shook his arm and felt that it was very uncomfortable. After repeating this monotonous action, even his soul could not bear it. As the fragments became fewer and fewer, everyone seemed to see hope. They sped up and collected the fragments that were previously floating in the air. Ning Shu tied up his pockets and sat down to rest. The army came and took away these pockets. He did not know where these fragments would end up. He remembered that those bugs also ate fragments and the world's origin. The things those bugs ate were really high-end. So, the trash was collected to prevent it from harming the surrounding plains. Secondly, it could be used as supplies for future wars and peace talks. When he was not collecting the trash, Ning Shu opened the black bone umbrella. The surface of the umbrella was originally white and glossy, but now it was gray. It looked as if it was covered with a layer of dust. It could not be brushed off. He suddenly felt disgusted. The umbrella was dirty. However, in order to prevent her soul from being contaminated, Ning Shu still kept an umbrella open. Anyway, she could not see the surface of the umbrella. Out of sight, out of mind. When this umbrella completely became a black umbrella, he would buy a new one. 50,000 merit points to buy a new one. This time, he should have 100,000 merit points as a reward. He could buy 2 umbrellas. He had already picked up all the trash. Was he going to deal with it here and then head to the next place? There was no end to it. Did he never stop? Ning Shu felt that doing missions was more comfortable. He was fulfilling the wishes of the person who entrusted him. He could do whatever was comfortable. Ning Shu did not know anyone here except for Fragrant Wind Man and Tai Shu. The others gathered in groups and chatted, while she stood alone. Ning Shu felt that he had been a lone ranger for a long time. He should get to know more people in the future. At least, he should have a nodding acquaintance with these bosses. However, when his world of reincarnation was successful, there should be many people coming to him to connect to the world of reincarnation. Therefore, there was no need to painstakingly build relationships with others. When flowers bloomed, there would be butterflies. When grass was fertilized, there would be wild horses. With enough capital, there would naturally be people coming to him. Come, let's be friends. If he went over directly, others would dislike him and make him uncomfortable. He just played with the umbrella handle and then studied the water droplet between his eyebrows. Could this thing really produce the source of life? But how could he bring it up alone? Ning Shu, who had nothing to do, wanted to stimulate his spiritual ball to strengthen his spiritual power. However, he would probably have to pick up the trash later. He did not want to torture himself. Who thought of such a self-harming cultivation method? Chapter 2745. Ning Shu suspected that this was a cultivation method created by someone who wanted to take revenge on society. Because it was too painful. He started to connect the planes. Senior Uncle only used a small portion of the star stones and left a lot behind. Ning Shu picked up some scraps. Seeing Senior Uncle let the army take away the rest of the star stones, he quickly said, "There are so many left. Can you give me some?" It was piled up like a mountain. Ning Shu deeply felt that he might be cheated. When Senior Uncle returned the peerless martial arts to him, he gave him 2 star stones and asked for 100 years of taxes from Water City and Wood City. Ning Shu didn't think about how much money that was. Senior uncle nodded. Pick up 2 pieces. Ning Shu immediately picked up 2 large and tall star stones and stuffed them into the mesen space. Since he promised to give it to her, he shouldn't take it away from her mesen space. He remembered that he secretly stuffed a star stone fragment, but the star stone disappeared in the blink of an eye. Ning Shu glanced at senior uncle and stuffed another 2 large pieces into the mesen space. Seeing that he didn't speak, he took another 2 large pieces. Being stared at, he braced himself and picked up 2 more pieces before stopping. You didn't ask me to stop. I can only think that you acquiesced to me taking things. He was shameless enough to burst his belly. She didn't expect to get 8 large star stones without spending a penny. She probably didn't need to worry about the law of nothingness for a long time. Sure enough, there was fragrance beyond the walls. Although she couldn't directly deal with the law of nothingness now, she didn't need to worry about it overflowing all the time. Because she now had enough star stones to hold the law of nothingness. Happy. It was worth picking up trash this time. Ning Shu held the black bone umbrella and asked senior uncle, "Can we go now?" Senior uncle took a few steps back and stayed far away from Ning Shu. Ning Shu turned the handle of the umbrella. TSK, he was actually afraid of an umbrella. Ning Shu really wanted to close the umbrella and throw it directly at him. But he didn't dare to for now. Wait a little longer. I still have to pick up. The Grand Elder's face was cold. Is there something wrong with your brain? You're holding an umbrella every day like a retard. Ning Shu shrugged. I like it. It's none of your business. I like to run around with an umbrella. You're in charge of the heavens and the earth, but you're in charge of my umbrella. You don't believe that you're going to kill me just because I'm holding an umbrella? Grand Elder glanced at her as if she was an idiot. Then, he checked the connection of the planes. The star stone liquid had dried up, and the planes were connected. He said to everyone, "Let's go to the next place." Sigh, how miserable, everyone sighed. They were obviously tired, but they had no choice but to do it. It was tough. Ning Shu followed him into the spatial tunnel. He stretched out his hand and touched the tunnel. Why was the space constructed by others so sturdy and stable? Could it be that there was some trick to it? Poor students really couldn't afford to be hurt. Ning Shu walked at the back, carefully inspecting the spatial passageway to find out its secrets. As he walked and comprehended, Ning Shu discovered something. That was because the passageway was fixed with many triangles. What was the most stable shape? It was definitely a triangle. After learning this, he would test it out when he went back. Ning Shu quickened his pace and followed the people in front. This time, there was quite little damage to the planes. One plane was broken, and there weren't many fragments. There were hundreds of people. After dividing it evenly, everyone didn't need to pick up much. After picking up the pieces and completing the mission, they left. Ning Shu carried the bag and began to pick up the trash. At a glance, the planes were like a huge hive, boundless and endless. One by one, the planes formed a spectacular and huge hive. The planes were very big. Billions of planes were connected together. The scene was needless to say. Ning Shu felt that the army was also quite miserable. They had to patrol so many planes. Once they found a problem, they had to stabilize it immediately. The previous 18 planes that had collapsed obviously hadn't been discovered immediately. When they found out, it took some time to control the situation. During this time, a few more planes must have collapsed. Mission enforcers, armies, and organizations were all for the sake of these billions of planes. Of course, there were also benefits. If people were asked to work for free, who would be willing to do it all the time? Picking up trash was said to be volunteer work. There was still a reward. Whether it was more or less depended on the attitude. They couldn't really ask people to do volunteer work. If they were forced to do it a few times a month, who would be willing? They would definitely slack off. If there was a reward, you had to at least do this job well. One person was worth 100,000 merit points. There were hundreds of people here. That was millions of merit points. The creatures of their planes had to be transferred to other worlds. Transporting the creatures of a world was a reward of tens of millions of merit points. Transporting the creatures of more than 10 worlds to other mission enforcers' worlds, how much merit points would they have to pay? This account couldn't be calculated in detail. It was a sky-high number. The planes that collapsed were all money, merit points, and power of faith. Scary. Where could the organization get so much money? Could it be that they were extorting wool over and over again? Even if they were, it was just a drop in the bucket. There was also the military expenses. It seemed that the Bone Army of His Excellency also consumed merit points. Therefore, the organization needed to pay for the military expenses. The military expenses of the world of Samsara and the mission enforcers' rewards. Could this organization make a profit? What was it for? Such a huge organization. Who knew what kind of earthquake it would cause if it collapsed one day? The closer he got to the organization, the more confused he felt. Ning Shu picked up the trash. There were many things in his mind. Actually, these planes were quite blessed. There were people guarding them. In unknown places, there were people guarding them like this. Ning Shu wanted to ask Fragrant Wind Man about the organization. But when he saw his dark face, he decided not to go over. Because there were few fragments, they finished picking up quickly. Everyone stopped and started to rest. Ning Shu tied up the trash bags, put them separately, and sat down. Someone sat down next to him. Ning Shu asked, "What rule did you comprehend?" Ning Shu pointed to his eyebrows. "It's this rule." "Water?" that person asked uncertainly. Ning Shu shook his head. "It's a bit like water, a bit like life. Anyway, I'm not too sure myself. Life, it's quite impressive." That person laughed and left. Ning Shu raised his eyebrows. He saw that the person who asked the question walked to the crowd over there. He guessed that the person was talking about something. Many people glanced at Ning Shu. In this situation, Ning Shu saw that the topic was obviously talking about her. What did he say behind her back? But Ning Shu didn't care much. He opened the umbrella and sat cross-legged. The umbrella covered half of his body. Ning Shu used his spiritual power to invade the Meson space to check if the big star stones were still there. He was really worried. The big star stones were still in the Meson space. Ning Shu heaved a sigh of relief. He felt that the judge was narrow-minded. The star stones that she stole were actually very small. He had scraped them clean. Could it be that she couldn't take the things away without his permission? If that was the case, Ning Shu gave up the idea of fishing in troubled waters. Trembling with fear, he took 2 pieces. But when he went back to check, there was nothing, /BK. Chapter 2747. Without enough spiritual power, one couldn't build a long space tunnel. Ning Shu stimulated the spiritual sphere in his consciousness. It was so painful that he couldn't stand up. It was painful and he couldn't see any effect. Ning Shu returned to the system space and opened the exchange store. He decided to change his training method. Because this method was really too painful. It was so painful and there was no effect. At least his spiritual power didn't increase. And Ning Shu was a little scared when he looked at the spiritual sphere in his consciousness. The pain of stimulating the spiritual sphere was unforgettable. The person who invented this training method must be crazy. Ning Shu couldn't find any other secret manuals. Spiritual power was innate, but part of it could be developed. But there were no other training methods. Therefore, he had no choice but to use the spiritual ball as a cultivation method. Ning Shu hugged his head. It was so painful. Forget it, he would stimulate it when he had time. Maybe he would get used to the pain. Damn, how could he get used to the pain? Passively enduring the pain and torturing himself was a little cruel. Ning Shu said to 2333, then let's go do the mission. If he didn't do the mission, he would be pulled in again. He was the one who was tired, others didn't care if he was tired or not. Ning Shu suddenly had the illusion that doing the mission was resting. 2333 asked, do the system mission. System mission again. 2333 just woke up not long ago. Why did he want to devour the system again? Ning Shu shook his head, not for now. Doing the system mission was tiring. It wasn't dealing with one person, it was dealing with one person plus one system. The difficulty wasn't 1 plus 1 equals 2. It was 1 plus 1 greater than 2. She didn't want to do it now. She would think about it later. She had exchanged the fasting pills and medicine before. She could go do the mission now. There was a feeling of weightlessness. Ning Shu merged into a body. The merging speed was faster than ever before. In the past, when he entered a body, it was like being forced in. It was very uncomfortable. Now, it was like water flowing into the body. Soon, success came naturally, and he didn't feel uncomfortable at all. Ning Shu opened his eyes and found himself in a bathtub. The bathtub was filled with water, and flower petals floated on the surface of the water, emitting a fragrant steam. His whole body was soaked in the warm water, making him feel warm and comfortable. The first time he entered her body, it felt so good. There were maids around them who were wiping Ning Shu's body. Their small hands were massaging his body gently, making him feel very comfortable. Some people kept adding hot water to it. Looking at the surrounding decorations, they were also from a wealthy family. Well, at least I don't have to worry about food and clothing. Ning Shu closed his eyes slightly, enjoying it while accepting the plot. However, after receiving the plot, Ning Shu felt that such a rich life without having to worry about food and clothing was a bit of a scam. The client's name was Ning Ani. His father was a fourth-ranked official from the Ministry of Rights. However, Ning Ani's father's achievements in politics were not outstanding. His ability was average, so he was not favored by the emperor. A very mediocre person. However, he was good at giving birth to a daughter. His eldest daughter married the emperor's great-grandson, Xiao Zijin. Xiao Zijin's father was the emperor's favorite son. He was a talented Chinese and had the benevolence of a ruler. He would probably be the next emperor. However, the heavens were jealous of talents. Then, Xiao Zijin's father died. As for how he died, it was said that he had an incurable disease, but some said that it was poison. Anyway, the person most likely to become the emperor was dead. It was a pity for the emperor to place all his love on his grandson. Xiao Zijin was given the title of a prince and was doted on. Xiao Zijin and Ning Ani's sister, Ning Anshuang, got married and became the famous golden couple in the capital. The two of them were so loving that others envied them. However, when Ning Anshuang was pregnant and gave birth to a son, she passed away. With his wife gone, Xiao Zijin hugged the skinny monkey and couldn't get up. He handed the baby to the wet nurse and didn't care about it at all. Since the master didn't care about the child and the child didn't have a mother, the wet nurse naturally neglected him. The child often cried from hunger and fell sick. When Xiao Zijin heard that his son almost died of illness, he woke up from his dream. How could he not love the child of his beloved wife? It was his wife who passed away. He was immersed in his pain and neglected the child. Xiao Zijin dealt with the wet nurse and took care of the child himself. Then, he remembered that the child didn't have a mother. As for the client, he followed his mother to see his sister's child. It didn't matter. Ning Ani, who was somewhat similar to his sister, caught Xiao Zijin's eye. Thus, when he knew that Ning Ani was of marriageable age, Xiao Zijin went to propose marriage. He wanted his sister-in-law to be his second wife. Moreover, she was the child's aunt. He didn't have to worry that the princess would mistreat or abuse the child in the future. For Father Ning, it was a great thing that both of his daughters married into the royal family and were both legal wives. It couldn't be more perfect. Moreover, the client's mother also agreed. In short, they hit it off. Under the matchmaker's orders, the client, Ning Ani, directly married over. She married her brother-in-law. At this time, this situation was very normal. Ning Ani's impression of her brother-in-law was still that he was deeply in love with her sister. Suddenly marrying her brother-in-law was also indescribably strange. Before getting married, her mother told her to take good care of her sister's child. On the wedding night, her husband called her sister's name. The next morning, a servant brought over medicine, which was said to relieve fatigue and pain. Ning Ani drank it, so she became infertile. This was a bowl of medicine for infertility. It was very cold and harmful to the body. The client was only of marriageable age and had just reached 16 years old. She drank it, and every time her period came, she would be in great pain. Of course, the client didn't know about this at that time. She just came to the prince's mansion and naturally couldn't do anything disobedient. She drank whatever she was given. The client shouldered the responsibility of taking care of the child. Ning Ani could be considered her nephew. Now, he was also her son in name. The client not only had to take care of the child, but also take care of Xiao Zijin. Moreover, the client found that the servant beside her would interfere with her daily necessities. This servant had always taken care of Xiao Zijin, so she had to give her some face. For example, Princess, the former princess liked to wear plain clothes. In reality, the client didn't like plain clothes. Princess, the former princess liked music. The client liked embroidery and calligraphy. Princess, the peach blossom cake made by the former princess is very delicious. Prince likes it very much. The client wore her sister's clothes and was forced to learn music. She also had to learn how to make peach blossom cakes. Xiao Zijin saw that the client was becoming more and more satisfied. She looked at her with reminiscence, gentleness, and love/BK. Chapter 2748. Sometimes, the living couldn't compare to the dead. The dead lived in their hearts, and their memories were all beautiful. As for the living, they only saw the magnified shortcomings. The smell was far away. The client was also a little rebellious and often insisted, making Xiao Zijin unhappy. She would carry the child to her room to sleep. At this time, Ning Ani's heart was uneasy, and her mother scolded her for being childish. What's wrong with saying this? You're all sisters anyway. As for the father, he was afraid of offending the prince, so he wouldn't say anything and let his wife beat his daughter. Who didn't know that his two daughters were married to the emperor's obedient grandson? Outside, people would give him face. If the prince and his daughter didn't have a good relationship, it would implicate him. Under pressure from all sides, the client had no choice but to compromise. This compromise would lead to more compromises. From then on, the client had to live like an older sister. What time to eat, when to sleep, what to eat, what to do, she had to learn from her older sister. In short, Ning Shu's conclusion was that after his wife died and he married his sister-in-law, he had to transform his sister-in-law into his wife. He had to transform her into a perfect wife. The more perfect and beautiful Xiao Zijin's wife was, the greater the requirements for the client. How to smile, how to speak, what tone to use. He was strict in all aspects and meticulous. Even so, Xiao Zijin was very clear that Ning Ani wasn't his beloved wife. If she wasn't the child's mother, he wouldn't let the child get too close to the client. This kind of life was uninhibited. The client had to live like a doll, and couldn't have her own personality or opinions. Xiao Zijin wanted to turn the client into an ideal wife, a wife who was constantly magnified and beautiful in his memory. The client was unhappy, depressed, and in pain. She was suffocating and desperate. Moreover, she had been married for a few years and didn't have any children. But the client's mother said that a woman didn't want to worry about food and clothing. Look, she married a prince and was a princess consort, so her status was noble. As for children, your older sister's child was also related to you by blood. Whether you had children or not depended on fate. You had to treat the child sincerely, because it was also your biological child. The client felt even more miserable and desperate. These people still felt that they were taking her older sister's position, but they didn't ask for my opinion and married me to my brother-in-law back then. Now I feel that I'm taking someone else's position. She was from her maternal family, so whenever she mentioned her sister, she would speak in a regretful tone, blah blah blah. Her protest seemed weak and helpless. Once she made a fuss, it would seem that she had taken advantage of him and was now pretending to be innocent. As the child grew up, the child no longer called the client mother, but little aunt. He also felt that the client had taken over his mother's position. In short, they weren't close. Xiao Zijin deliberately portrayed this lack of intimacy. Every day, the client had to be a big sister. Only when she fell asleep did she feel like a different person. When the sun rose, it was as if her soul had left her body. She was no longer herself, but a marionette. However, Xiao Zijin did treat the client quite well. There were no concubines in the backyard. In the capital, Xiao Zijin could be considered a man of high status and power. I want to marry him. Facing the envious gazes of others, the client smiled like an elder sister. Some people's gazes were quite strange. If the client's appearance was only somewhat similar to his sister's before, then their behavior and temperament were 90% similar now. At first glance, it was as if a dead person had come back to life. The client endured it. Her heart had been blocked by this breath, but she couldn't vent it. No one around her cared what she thought. Then, the client fell ill. Before she died, she accidentally learned that on the second day of her marriage, she drank the childless soup and would never have children in this life. The client completely collapsed. Xiao Zijin used her lifetime of happiness, personality, and dignity to recall the little bit of beauty in his heart. In order to ensure that she didn't have any selfish motives and wouldn't have other thoughts after giving birth to a child, she would never be able to have children in this life. Did she say that she wanted to marry him? The childless soup became the last straw that broke the camel's back. If there was no childless soup, perhaps the client would feel sorry for herself and feel sorry for her life. But being treated like this by her husband on the second day of her marriage, then the marriage proposal was also deliberate. Her parents had all kinds of thoughts and married her off. So, the client vomited blood and died. Her wish was that she didn't want to be a marionette. She really had enough of living in the shadow of a dead person. Ning Shu opened his eyes in the steamy wooden barrel. It was said that the status of women in this era was low, but the client's situation should be a very extreme example. Without thinking, she was a puppet. Some people would resist, and most people in this situation would suffer from Stockholm Syndrome. Even if they regained their freedom, they would not want to leave. This should be Xiao Zijin's terrible and desirable ideal plan in her heart. Secondly, Ning Ani was only 16 years old, and Xiao Zijin was almost 24 years old. It was a pity that the client had already become a princess consort and had already drunk the infertility decoction. Ning Shu touched her belly under the water. The greatest achievement of a woman was to give birth to children. When this was taken away from her, the pain could be imagined. Whether I want to have children or not is my business. But if you make me unable to have children, I won't let you off. Princess, the water is cold. Do you want to get up? Mammy Li asked Ning Shu softly. Ning Shu nodded and stood up from the bathtub. The maidservant wiped off the water droplets on her body. Although there were people serving her in brocade clothes, there was no hope for such a life. Without motivation and anger in her heart, she was like a walking corpse. Mammy Li covered Ning Shu with clothes and helped Ning Shu put on her undergarments. Ning Shu yawned, went around the screen, and directly lay down on the bed, looking lazy. Mammy Li reminded Ning Shu, "Princess, please pay attention to your manners." Ning Shu pulled the quilt over her body and ignored her words. She was talking in his ear when eating and sleeping. What was the purpose of life? Ning Shu rubbed her feet under the quilt. In the winter, the quilt was cold, and the client's hands and feet were cold. Although she had just taken a bath and her body was a little warm, in the cold quilt, her body became cold again. Ning Shu said to Mammy Li, "Prepare a hot water for me to warm my feet. It's cold." Ning Shu began to practice peerless martial arts, and cold air came out of her body. A girl's fire was not very strong, and after drinking the childless soup, her body was cold as if it was not her own in winter. Nanny Li asked the maid to get a hot water bowl for Ning Shu and put it under her feet. /BK Chapter 2749. The princess consort was the master. Although the prince had asked her to supervise, the prince would definitely be angry if she didn't even get a hot water bottle. The prince valued the princess consort quite a lot. With the hot water bottle, Ning Shu felt that his frozen feet were a little warm. Anyway, there was no heat in the lower half of his body under the blanket. As for Xiao Zijin, the emperor had given him a mission recently. He had been busy for a few days and hadn't come here to sleep for a few days. Actually, Xiao Zijin had some strength to compete with his uncle for the position of the emperor. Especially now that the emperor doted on his grandson. Therefore, when he asked the client to be his second wife, the Ning family happily agreed. After all, Xiao Zijin might be the future emperor. If the Ning family could produce an empress, it would be a great thing to bring glory to their family. Unfortunately, of the two daughters who married Xiao Zijin, one died in childbirth, and the other died of depression and vomited blood. It was impossible for the Ning family to rely on their daughter to become the emperor's father-in-law. When Xiao Zijin was tired and sleepy, he would go to the room he used to live in with Ning Anshuang. After the client married Xiao Zijin, they lived in another courtyard, not in the original main room. Not living in the main room made the client's identity even more awkward. When Xiao Zijin didn't come to the client's place, he would go to his old room. The room was filled with portraits of Ning Anshuang. Ning Shu spat. If they were really in love with each other, they could just stay by these portraits and live their lives. And it was so harmful. Xiao Zijin probably knew that his wife was dead and the emperor would appoint a noble lady as his wife. At this time, the client was the best candidate. He was somewhat similar to his wife. Occasionally, he could deceive himself and express his feelings of yearning on the client's body. Who knew if Xiao Zijin really loved Ning Anshuang at this time or if he was used to thinking about her. With the hot water bottle, Ning Shu's body felt a little more comfortable. He absorbed a small amount of spiritual energy and fell asleep. He felt that this body was lacking sleep. The client probably didn't sleep well. In the middle of the night, he heard the baby crying loudly. The cries spread far and wide. Ning Shu didn't even move on the bed. He continued to sleep. The baby's cries grew louder and louder. It was heartbreaking. The maidservant who was keeping watch at night gently called out to Ning Shu, "Princess consort, the little heir is crying. Do you want to go over and take a look?" Ning Shu said in a muffled voice, "There's a wet nurse. The wet nurse will take good care of him." Usually, she had to take care of the child's needs as soon as possible. However, the child was not close to her at all. Xiao Zijin had taught him not to get close to her. It's fine if you don't want to get close to him. Anyway, he's your son. You can take care of him yourself. The young maidservant was a little uneasy and whispered, but the little heir keeps crying. Is he uncomfortable? Right now, the most pampered person in the residence was the little heir. If something were to happen to the little heir, it would be a complete mess. Ning Shu just snorted twice and didn't intend to get up. The little servant girl was helpless. She had already reminded her master, but there was nothing she could do if her master didn't go. The prince would definitely be angry. The young maidservant nudged Ning Shu again. Princess consort, do you want to get up? Let me help you change. How much courage did it take to get up on such a cold day? If she got up, the bed would be cold again. Although there was a charcoal brazier, it couldn't be lit under the bed. Ning Shu also knew that this maidservant was reminding her out of kindness, so she said, "It's okay. He's just hungry. The wet nurse will feed him." The young maidservant looked uncertain and had nothing to say. The child kept crying and woke Xiao Zijin up. Xiao Zijin hurriedly put on her clothes and had the servant beside her carry a lantern to the child's room. As soon as she entered the room, she saw the wet nurse coaxing the child with an anxious expression. The child closed his eyes and wailed loudly. His hands and feet were flailing, and his face was red. "What's wrong with him?" Xiao Zijin asked with a sullen face. The wet nurse said fearfully, "He might be having a nightmare. Let me coax him more and he'll be fine." "Where's Princess Consort? Why isn't Princess Consort coming?" Xiao Zijin looked around and didn't see her wife. Her face darkened even more. The child was crying like this, but she didn't even come to take a look. The backyard and the child should be the Princess Consort's responsibility. Is there any way to make him stop crying like this? Xiao Zijin's heart ached when she saw her son crying like this. "Let me coax him more and call out the little heir's name." The wet nurse was so anxious that she was sweating all over and her back was covered in cold sweat. She was afraid of being punished. The previous wet nurse who neglected the heir had met a terrible end. The wet nurse didn't know why the little heir was crying. He didn't eat and just cried like this. "Let me carry him." Xiao Zijin reached out and took the weak child from the wet nurse's arms. She gently coaxed and slowly rocked him. As if feeling a sense of security from Xiao Zijin, the child gradually stopped crying and fell into a deep sleep. Xiao Zijin handed the child to the wet nurse. As soon as he went out, his face was as dark as the sky. Xiao Zijin went directly to his wife's courtyard. The servant knocked on the door and the maidservant opened it. When she saw Xiao Zijin, she was so frightened that she hurriedly called for Ning Shu. Ning Shu sat up and looked at the cold Xiao Zijin. Xiao Zijin's face was handsome and the son resembled his father. From Xiao Zijin, one could see how glorious Xiao Zijin's father was. But now that she saw Ning Shu in the warm bed and the child crying so pitifully, Xiao Zijin's heart surged with anger. This was a failure as a wife. Ning Shu smiled slightly. "Why is Prince here? It's cold outside. Come here quickly." Ning Shu patted the empty space on the bed. "Come up and we'll have a story. Hong is crying like this. Why don't you go and see him? You're his mother." Xiao Zijin looked coldly at Ning Shu. Ning Shu still smiled, but his smile was dazzling to Xiao Zijin. He could still smile at this time. If it was Xuan who knew how anxious she would be right now. She wouldn't care about someone who wasn't her biological child. Now she was so neglectful. If she had her own child, she would probably ignore Hong even more. Not everyone was as kind as Xuan Ning Shu sighed and said, "This concubine has never raised a child. If there's a problem with the child, this concubine is blind and doesn't know what to do. If there are too many people, the child will be easily frightened. The wet nurse hired by the Fu can calm Hong Xiao Zijin was still not happy. She was even angrier. This was a matter of attitude. If Hong-er was sick or something happened to him, she didn't care. Was this proper? Marrying this wife, besides being Xuang-er's younger sister, she looked a bit similar to Xuang-er. More importantly, she took care of Hong-er. Hong-er was her nephew. She should care about Hong-er more than other women and not treat Hong-er as a thorn in her side. Now it seemed that he was taking things for granted. Her performance before was quite good. Now she was lazy. Chapter 2750. Ning Shu and Xiao Zijin looked at each other speechlessly. Xiao Zijin saw his princess consort sitting on the bed and did not get out of bed to welcome her. Ning Shu smiled and said, "Your Highness, it's too cold. I won't get out of bed." Xiao Zijin, it was definitely a mistake. She should take good care of her husband. But it was not a big mistake. After all, it was so cold. It was not bad that his wife did not get out of bed. If a husband cared for his wife, he probably would not force his wife out of bed. But Xiao Zijin's heart was filled with anger. That was the princess consort's neglect of the child. Now that he looked so lazy, Xiao Zijin felt very uncomfortable. Hong-er is also your nephew. Not to mention that he is your child now, even as his aunt, you should be worried when he is sick. Xiao Zijin was wearing clothes. In the middle of the night, her body was cold. Ning Shu said, "Of course I am worried about Hong-er, but I can't do anything. What's the use of standing there? I really planned to get someone to invite a doctor over to take a look at him." When a child was uncomfortable, hungry, or pooped, he could only cry to express himself. Xiao Zijin could clearly feel that the other party was being perfunctory. Was she Hong-er's biological mother? If she was, she would probably be by Hong-er's bedside, unable to fall asleep. Ning Shu had seen many people like Xiao Zijin. She wanted others to do things that she could not do herself. If the dead Ning Anshuang knew about Xiao Zijin's actions, she would probably vomit in disgust. If I died and you married another woman, I wouldn't say anything. But you found someone similar to me and let this woman imitate me, learn from me, and flaunt your love. While mourning me affectionately, you found a woman to disgust others. Who did you want to disgust? For Ning Ani, she had no room to resist. She was forced to learn from her sister and live like her sister. Her husband gave all his love to her sister. On the second day of marriage, she was forced to take medicine to prevent her from having children. She could not have children for the rest of her life. She had to take care of her sister and brother-in-law's children. She also had to take good care of them. If there was anything wrong with the child, she had to be more proactive than anyone else. Otherwise, she would not be qualified and would not be the perfect wife image of Xiao Zijin. For the rest of her life, she had to live under the shadow of a dead person, and that person was her own sister. Who should be blamed? Perhaps Tian's sister still resented her for taking her place. In short, Xiao Zijin's self-righteous love tortured the two women. Xiao Zijin watched as Ning Shu sat motionless on the bed, wrapping himself in the quilt from time to time. He looked as if he wished he could use the quilt to cover himself up. Previously, she was still considered virtuous. What was going on now? The young maidservant was trembling with fear. Could it be that Wang Fei didn't see that Wang Ye was angry? She wanted to remind Wang Fei several times, but Wang Ye was here, so she didn't dare to speak. Xiao Zijin snorted coldly. She flicked her sleeves and turned to leave. The manservant beside her hurriedly followed with a lantern. Ning Shu lay down. Who doesn't know how to snort? The hot water woman is a little cold. Change the hot water. Ning Shu said to the little maid. Ah, yes. The little maid froze for a moment. Apparently, she didn't expect that Ning Shu's request was to change the hot water woman. After stuffing the hot water woman back into the quilt, Ning Shu sighed comfortably and then went to sleep. While cultivating, he was thinking about how to counterattack. In this era of 3 obedience and 4 virtues, a married woman's husband was everything. When a woman's status was low, she didn't dare to resist a man's request. In addition, Xiao Zijin consciously trained her client to be a beloved wife. According to the steps of training, if she made a mistake, she would be beaten with a stick and neglected. If she did well, she would be rewarded. It was a carrot for a stick. She was very willing to use both the carrot and the stick. This time, she made Xiao Zijin unhappy. Xiao Zijin would certainly neglect her for a long time. Ning Shu expressed that he didn't want to. To get rid of the life of a puppet, who made the client's life like a puppet and made the client's life hopeless. It was him, it was still him, Xiao Zijin. To solve the client's situation, it was up to Xiao Zijin. Otherwise, Xiao Zijin would die. No one would control the client, let the client wear what they wanted, and what they wanted to eat. Then, the client would raise his nephew. In the future, the glory of the Wangfu would still be in the hands of this child. The client would be the boss of this Wangfu. Although the orphan and widow were pitiful, they were still relatives of the imperial family. They didn't have to worry about food and clothing. He loved his wife so much, then send him to see his wife. However, he had to ensure that there were no loopholes in this matter. He had to make it seem that Xiao Zijin's death was caused by the fight for the throne. In any case, Xiao Zijin's uncles didn't like him. Another plan was to train Xiao Zijin into a shiver. If you train me, I will turn you into a puppet. In front of the client, you would be a masochist. However, this method could be subverted at any time. There was no guarantee that it would work. Moreover, people were fickle. Either let Xiao Zijin lie sick in bed, everything in the Wangfu depended on the client. At this time, Xiao Zijin wouldn't have the energy to train the client. However, it could also be because she was sick in bed and became more mentally distorted. Although there were many plans, in this era where divorce was not allowed, especially in a royal marriage, it was a bit of a scam to swallow the joys and sorrows by oneself. Moreover, the maternal family would definitely not agree. Firstly, their reputation would be ruined. Secondly, their glory would be gone. The emperor's reaction might be even more fatal. What, you want to divorce my grandson? My grandson was abandoned by a woman. There was no such thing. Therefore, the possibility of divorce was zero. The path of separation was not feasible. This kind of feeling was like stepping on dog feces, but there was no way to jump away. There was no way to deal with this pile of feces. She could only be tied here and cry. The relationship between the two was so unbalanced that it rotted bit by bit. The client was in such a relationship. The more Xiao Zijin abused her and put shackles on her mind, the more the client was attached to Xiao Zijin and couldn't leave her. Because she had sacrificed too much, she was not reconciled and wanted to get back her original self from this man. She imitated others and ate the food she didn't like. She had sacrificed a lot. Moreover, she would continue to sacrifice to get less and less attention. If it wasn't for the contraceptive soup, Ning Ani would have lived like this for the rest of her life. In fact, this was the reason why girls couldn't leave scumbags. Humans had a strong self-healing ability, but this was also harmful. It made people unable to give up this harmful way of living. Ning Ani knew that this kind of life was hopeless, but there was no other way. She couldn't leave this harmful person. /BK Chapter 2751 Ning Shu compared several plans and decided to let Xiao Zijin live. Of course, she wanted her to live a good life and live a good life where she would have everything she needed. The next morning, Nanny Li nagged in Ning Shu's ears. It was nothing more than taking care of the little heir, etiquette and so on. Ning Shu pretended not to hear her. She took out a set of light green clothes from the cabinet and planned to wear them. Nanny Li frowned. Your Highness, are you going to wear this? The former princess consort never wore this color. Ning Shu said, Oh, I know sister doesn't like to wear it, but I like to wear it. I like this color. Your Highness, can't I even decide what to wear? Why don't you be the princess consort? Ning Shu said expressionlessly. I don't dare. In the end, Ning Shu wore the original color. When it was time for breakfast, she chose what she liked to eat. Nanny Li's face was full of wrinkles. She couldn't bear to look at it. Your Highness, try this. Nanny Li pushed the pickled vegetables in front of Ning Shu. I don't eat pickled vegetables. If I eat them, I will get a terminal illness. Cancer couldn't be cured in a car accident. Why would she eat pickled vegetables? Nanny Li found that the princess consort was particularly rebellious today. She used to eat whatever she was told to eat, but today she didn't listen. Your Highness, I heard that you made the prince unhappy last night. Make some peach blossom cakes later. The prince will definitely be appeased. I'm the princess consort. I cook every day. Is there no cook in the prince's mansion? There is. Why do you want me to do it? If I do it, the cook will have nothing to do. I'm stealing someone else's job, Ning Shu said directly. What peach blossom cakes? Where did the peach blossoms come from in such cold weather? Normally, there were no peach blossoms. But because the former princess consort liked peach blossom cakes, she would pick the peach blossoms every spring when the peach blossoms bloomed and dry them in the sun. In this way, there would be peach blossoms all year round. Ning Shu wondered if she was really not tired of eating the same kind of cake all year round. Nanny Li, there was a cook, but the meaning of making it yourself was different. The former Wang Fei often made peach blossom cakes for Wang Ye. Li Mama sighed and said, This old servant knows that Wang Fei is not worried, but this is the fastest way to open Wang Ye's heart. Open his heart and lungs. Relying on pastries? Just use a knife. Every time Mammy Li said this kind of words, which was to subtly influence Xiao Zijin to learn from her sister. Only at this time, Xiao Zijin was willing to look at her and talk to her more. Immersed in such a vicious cycle, they were unable to extricate themselves. This was equivalent to a shortcut to quickly establish a relationship between husband and wife, but behind this shortcut, the client would no longer have a sense of self. Ning Shu put down his chopsticks. I really don't know how to make peach blossom cakes. Rather than using peach blossom cakes to evoke Wang Ye's lovesickness, it's better not to make it. Nanny Li was stunned, but she couldn't say anything more. She changed the topic and asked, Does Princess Consort want to see the little heir? Ning Shu rinsed his mouth, wiped his face, and went to the wet nurse to see the child. Hong wasn't even a year old yet. He could sit up, turn over, and bite things. He was white and tender, and his eyes were as black as ink. At first glance, he was a cute child. The wet nurse hurriedly bowed to Ning Shu. Ning Shu sat by the bed, picked up Hong and shook the rattledrum in front of him. Hong drooled and stretched out his white and tender hand to grab the rattledrum. Hong be good. I'm your aunt. Ning Shu coaxed him. This child would be the client's support in the future. However, this child was a little older, so the client was estranged. The client was isolated and helpless in this prince's mansion. There was no one around her. She said that they were a family, but no one treated her as a family member. Hong looked at her with a guarded and disgusted look. In the future, if the client's body couldn't recover, she would have to raise Hong as her own son. If she recovered, even if she was pregnant, Xiao Zijin had 100 ways to prevent this child from being born. He was very affectionate. Except for his beloved wife who could bear his child, no other woman was worthy. Secondly, for Hong Er's absolute rights, there would be no more children to share Hong Er's interests. Therefore, it was unlikely that the client really wanted to have a child. Ning Shu touched his chin and looked at the drooling Hong Er. The first thing to do was to make this child think that she was his aunt and wouldn't be his mother. When Hong Er was a little sensible, he didn't feel that the client had taken the position of a mother. Xiao Zijin liked to show off her love, especially her affectionate persona. When she had nothing to do, she would hold Hong Er in front of Ning Anshuang's portrait and reminisce about the past. Then in the child's heart, the client's identity was too abrupt. After all this time, Xiao Zijin felt wronged. When they were proposing marriage, someone pressed her head and dragged her there. Ning Shu wiped Hong Er's saliva with a soft cloth and smiled. What a good child. No matter what happened to this child in the future, she would definitely become the grand concubine of the prince's mansion and live a good life. The premise was that she had to endure until Xiao Zijin died. The client was so patient, but she obviously couldn't endure and died in front of Xiao Zijin. Ning Shu touched the child's little hand, deep in thought. What he had to do now was to take good care of his body. When Aunt Ma came, she would be in so much pain. Whether or not he could have children was one thing, but the pain of being cut by a steel knife every month was unbearable. However, it was obvious that using medicinal herbs to take medicine was impossible. After all, the prince's mansion was controlled by Xiao Zijin. Ning Shu planned to absorb the power of the fire to drive away the cold in his body. Besides, if he absorbed the power of the fire, he wouldn't be afraid of the cold in winter. Wah wah wah. Hong Er opened his mouth and wailed. The wet nurse immediately said, Wang Fei, let this servant take a look. The little prince must have peed. Ning Shu got up from the bed and stood to the side to watch the wet nurse change the diaper. The task of having a child was a little annoying. Ning Shu instructed the wet nurse to take good care of the little prince. He turned and left the room and met Xiao Zijin at the door. Xiao Zijin immediately came to see her son. Xiao Zijin was stunned when she saw Ning Shu, who was covered in green. She took a closer look and realized that it was her Wang Fei. Why are you wearing this kind of dress? It's too ugly. Xiao Zijin frowned and said. A woman would dress up for her lover, especially a woman who had nothing to do in the backyard. She would make herself more beautiful, hoping that a man would take a second look at her. She expected a man's pity. Don't I look good? Ning Shu held the dress and turned around. I think it looks good. I like this color. It doesn't look good. Don't wear it in the future. Xiao Zijin said with a sullen face. She said to Mammy Li behind Ning Shu, don't prepare such clothes for the princess in the future. It's too ugly. I don't want a princess who wears colorful clothes. I don't want a princess who dresses well like your sister. /BK. Chapter 2752. Ning Shu smiled faintly. Qinxia is only 16 years old and likes to wear colorful clothes. When Qinxia reaches elder sister's age, I will naturally dress as well as elder sister. Xiao Zijin was too lazy to argue with her. She said to Mammy Li, teach Wang Fei well. Let Wang Fei know what to do and what not to do. Mammy Li also bitterly and tiredly replied yes. If it was a servant girl, she could be taught in any way. She could be beaten or scolded. But the other party was the master. Sometimes she would be impatient and directly leave. Today, the mistress was obviously rebellious. She even dared to talk back to the prince. This made Mammy Li feel very tired. Ning Shu was still smiling. That inexplicable smile was dazzling to Xiao Zijin. What are you smiling at? As a Wang Fei, you should smile without showing your teeth. Being dignified and elegant is the right thing to do. Ning Shu's smile did not change. Wang Ye doesn't like Qinxia. In fact, Qinxia doesn't like you very much. You are presumptuous. She had never heard of a wife not liking her husband. Wuxia, you clearly love my sister so much. Why did you marry Chinchia? Don't you think you betrayed my sister? How sad my sister would be if she knew in the netherworld. You keep saying you love my sister, but in the blink of an eye, you married someone else. My sister will not enter your dreams. You want to deceive yourself? I won't let you deceive yourself with a clear conscience. I won't, shut up. You are not qualified to mention Shuang Er. Xiao Zijin gritted her teeth and stared at Ning Shu. Ning Shu looked surprised. She covered her mouth and stared at Xiao Zijin with round eyes. Wuxia, why is Chinchia not qualified to mention my sister? She is Chinchia's sister. We are sisters connected by blood. Moreover, it was the prince who proposed, not the Ning family. And when my sister died, she didn't entrust the child and you to Chinchia. You did it. Why did you feel wronged? Xiao Zijin's face was green and red like a palette. She gasped and stared at Ning Shu. Ning Shu continued, Your Highness, Chinchia married you because I love my nephew, Hong Er. In the future, Chinchia will take good care of Hong Er. Elder sister is elder sister, and this concubine is this concubine. In the future, Hong Er doesn't want his mother to be replaced by someone else. Your Highness, for Hong Er's sake, Hong Er should still call this concubine little aunt. Xiao Zijin didn't expect his new wife to be so daring to say such disobedient words. He sneered, Who do you think you are? You think you're qualified to talk about conditions with Ben Wang? Remember, you were able to marry into the Wangfu because of your sister and Hong Er. Ning Shu retorted, but Jiejie didn't say that she would marry you. If Jiejie knew that you had forgotten about her, she would be heartbroken, desperate, and upset. Aren't you very affectionate? Let's talk about your affectionate feelings. Do you want to transform someone into someone you love? Xiao Zijin's face couldn't be looked at anymore. Mammy Li kept winking at Ning Shu, but Ning Shu couldn't see it at all. This concubine knows that your highness and elder sister have a deep relationship, and I don't want to tarnish your love. So, your highness, please think that this concubine is temporarily staying in the Wangfu to take care of Hong Er. Xiao Zijin chuckled and his face trembled. He wanted to say something, but when the words came to his mouth, he couldn't refute. The anger in his heart made Xiao Zijin fly into a rage. Who do you think you are? How dare you tell me what to do? Also, don't let me hear Shuang Er's name come out of your mouth. Ning Shu, TSK, wasn't this deceiving himself? Today, he said these words to tell Xiao Zijin that he didn't have the right to make so many demands of her. He kept saying that he loved his wife, but if Ning Anshuang knew what he had done, she would be so disgusted that she would jump into the reincarnation pool. Transforming his sister into his own appearance, was this love? Perhaps these people with high positions and power, who could get anything they wanted as easily as flipping their palms, thought of deep love differently from ordinary people. He probably felt that what he had done was very touching. Xiao Zijin was very happy alone. He wanted to drag others along with him, but it was obvious that the unlucky one was Ning Ani. In the future, don't come to see Hong Er. Xiao Zijin deprived Ning Shu of the opportunity to spend time with Hong Er. Ning Shu wasn't in a hurry at all. Right now, Hong Er was still in a state of eating, drinking, and sleeping. At this time, he didn't have to worry about it. As for being sensible, it would still take a few years. Besides, children didn't have their own opinions. If Xiao Zijin could influence children, why couldn't she? Ning Shu bowed and said, Your Highness, this concubine and Hong Er are connected by blood. Don't tell me that this concubine doesn't even have the right to see elder sister's child. This concubine doesn't want to take over elder sister's position. When your highness proposed marriage, the Ning family couldn't refuse. Mother repeatedly warned this concubine to take good care of Hong Er. Ning Shu's words made the blue veins on Xiao Zijin's forehead jump. You are not Hong's mother. He doesn't need you to take care of him. Well, this is what you said. In the future, don't scold me when the child cries. Ning Shu covered her face and ran away sadly. Xiao Zijin looked at Ning Shu's back coldly and said to Mammy Li, the princess has reverted to her old ways. Teach her well. If anything happens, I will take the responsibility. Mammy Li hesitated and asked, what if the princess doesn't want to? Then you find a way to make her willing. Any way will do. I don't want to see such a princess. Mammy Li hurriedly replied, yes. Mammy Li felt terrible. She couldn't figure out what happened to the princess. What was the benefit of a woman being stubborn with a man? Men didn't like gentle and considerate women. It was a happy thing for everyone. Why did she make the prince unhappy? Moreover, she had to teach the master at her age. Thinking of the thick book of the former princess's life story, Mammy Li felt a headache. It would take a long time and a lot of effort to do all the things written in a book. And the parties involved would not necessarily cooperate. Mammy Li felt that she had to worry so much at her age. Sooner or later, she would die suddenly. When Mammy Li returned to the yard, she saw the princess drinking tea in light green clothes. She was young and looked good in such clothes. But so what if she looked good? It was useless if men didn't like her. Mammy Li poured tea for Ning Shu. She couldn't help but say to Ning Shu, Princess, a woman should be gentle. Today, she disobeyed the prince. She is not a model woman. Gentle? I said a few words. Do I have to be like a wooden stake and can't even speak? Is this gentle? Mammy Li suddenly choked. She moved her lips and said, of course, the princess can speak. But you can see through it but don't say it. Sometimes, there is no benefit in speaking unpleasantly. Ning Shu said, but I feel comfortable /BK. Chapter 2753. No matter how she tried to please Xiao Zijin, it was useless. Could she vomit out the medicine to make her infertility? Mammy Li, was it because he had suppressed her too much before? Now the princess rebounded and gave up on herself. He couldn't do it. That would not do. His Highness had ordered him not to let such a princess appear in front of His Highness. It was the servants who were unlucky. Princess, this old servant will say something unpleasant. You will make His Royal Highness unhappy and happy for a while. But if a woman can't get the love and respect of her husband, princess's life in the prince's mansion will not be good. Mammy Li tried her best to persuade. Ning Shu stared at Mammy Li. They were both women. If a woman had to retreat and please her husband, in this environment, the client could only give in step by step and lose all principles. The surrounding environment and the original family had a great impact on a person. In such an environment, women would become more and more docile and less rebellious. It added shackles to a woman's body. Being stared at by Ning Shu, Mammy Li felt uncomfortable. Her back was sweating. She asked, why are you looking at me like this? Nothing. Ning Shu drank tea. Since I made His Royal Highness unhappy, cook some dishes and invite His Royal Highness to come over for dinner. Mammy Li smiled like a blooming chrysanthemum. It's good that princess can figure it out. But you have to change your clothes first. If you change so suddenly, His Royal Highness will think that you are provoking His Majesty. Even if princess wants to change, you need to do it slowly. Mammy Li's words were very obedient. But in the end, her purpose was to let Ning Shu take off her clothes. Anyway, he didn't come. I'll wear it. If she took it off, she probably couldn't wear it again. Ning Shu personally cooked a few dishes that Xiao Zijin hated to eat. He cooked whatever tasted bad. As for Xiao Zijin's taste, the cook in the mansion and Ning Shu's wife knew it clearly. Mammy Li looked at the dishes on the table and was worried. She said with a straight face, Princess, His Royal Highness doesn't like to eat these things. His Royal Highness will be angry when he sees them. No, I definitely won't be angry. When the sky turned dark, Xiao Zijin stepped into the courtyard. She lifted the curtain and walked into the room. When she saw the dishes on the table, her face was extremely dark. There were several dishes on the table that he didn't like, and none of them were dishes that Shuang liked. Especially when he saw Ning Shu's green clothes, he immediately felt that it was an eyesore. Look again, oh, my eyes. Ning Shu politely invited Xiao Zijin to the table and said to Xiao Zijin, I know you don't like these dishes, but you have to eat them even if you don't like them. In the future, when you go out to eat, others will know what you like to eat and what you don't like to eat. It's very easy for them to do something to your food. Ning Shu's face said, I'm doing this for your own good. Even if I let you eat food you don't like, it's also for your safety. Ning Shu picked up some chives and put them on the plate in front of Xiao Zijin. Prince, eat quickly. Although you don't like it, you still have to eat. Xiao Zijin sneered at Ning Shu, Ning Ani, how dare you play this kind of trick in front of me? Ning Shu put down his chopsticks and lowered his head. Prince, why don't you understand my good intentions? If something happens to you, what will happen to me and Hong Er? Disgusting won't kill you. Xiao Zijin looked at the dishes on the table. None of them were what he liked. It made him feel nauseous. He really didn't have any appetite. Xiao Zijin didn't touch his chopsticks and left with a flick of his sleeves. Ning Shu picked up the bowl and ate. Except for the dishes that Xiao Zijin hated, he liked the other dishes. Besides, he wasn't picky about food. However, Ning Shu didn't make any of the dishes that Ning Anshuang liked. Nanny Li expressed her despair, but she struggled to say to Ning Shu, Prince didn't eat dinner. Princess will make some peach blossom cakes for Prince later. Ning Shu readily agreed, but he didn't make peach blossom cakes, but plum blossom cakes. The plum blossoms were picked fresh and made into cakes. He personally sent them to Xiao Zijin's study. He was told that Xiao Zijin was no longer in the study. He wasn't in the study. He had gone to the former main room. Ning Shu carried the food box to the room. The room was filled with all kinds of paintings. The antique shelves were filled with paintings, and the walls were filled with paintings. There was a person painted on the wall, Ning Anshuang. Ning Anshuang was indeed a beautiful woman. Especially under Xiao Zijin's pen, she was like a fairy. Xiao Zijin was writing rapidly. Obviously, he was painting. Ning Shu put the food box on the table and sat to one side, waiting for him to finish. Ning Shu felt that he was about to die from the scene in front of him. His stomach was sour. So affectionate. Xiao Zijin was very annoyed. He crumpled the paper into a ball and threw it on the ground. There were already several balls on the ground. What are you doing here? Xiao Zijin stared at Ning Shu with red eyes. Ning Shu opened the food box and took out the plum blossom cake. Prince hasn't eaten anything. I made a plum blossom cake and sent it over. Plum blossom cake. Xiao Zijin thought that he had heard wrongly. Shouldn't it be a peach blossom cake? Ning Shu nodded. Everyone in the residence knows that Prince likes to eat peach blossoms. You can find out if you ask around. So, Prince should have a variety of recipes. Not only do you eat peach blossom cakes, but also plum blossom cakes, chrysanthemum cakes, orchid cakes. Ning Shu had a worried expression. Prince, you are the head of the family. You can't be so willful. Xiao Zijin was so angry that he laughed. He picked up the plum blossom cake and threw it at Ning Shu. Ning Shu immediately dodged. The plate fell to the ground and the pieces of the cake splattered all over the floor. Ning Shu's dodging made Xiao Zijin explode in anger. You actually dare to dodge? Ning Shu bowed and earnestly advised, Prince, although there are some words that you don't like to hear, I still have to say them. Prince, please take care of yourself. Hong-er is still counting on Fodder. Xiao Zijin sneered, you are cursing Ben Wang to die. What plum blossom cake, chrysanthemum high. Let me tell you, Ben Wang only eats peach blossom cakes. You're doing this because you want to erase your sister's existence and traces. You're delusional. Ning Shu shook her head. Before, I heard that Prince and my sister were husband and wife. I thought that Prince would never marry anyone else in this life. But I didn't expect that Prince would marry me. My sister in the underworld must be very sad. I'll break your self-righteous love. Xiao Zijin's face was ugly. It's not that he didn't want to keep his chastity for his beloved wife. But as a member of the imperial family, if he kept his chastity for a woman for a lifetime, his imperial grandfather would be the first to disagree. At that time, he would be forced to marry a noble lady. For Hong-er, he must make a choice. And the woman in front of him was more suitable than other women. She looked like Shuang-er. She was Hong-er's aunt. They had a blood relationship. If she wasn't Shuang-er's sister and looked a bit like Shuang, she would have already rolled to the side courtyard. It seems that this woman's heart is big. She won't be obedient and roll to the side courtyard/BK. Chapter 2754. The plum blossom cake rolled all over the ground. Xiao Zijin looked at Ning Shu and did not speak. The two of them looked at each other and it was indescribably awkward. The two of them had their own plans and there was no warmth of a husband and wife. A husband and wife should be the closest strangers in the world. Ning Shu saw that Xiao Zijin's face was not good. She guessed that he was extremely tense. If she continued to speak, it might make him unhappy. Besides, she was here to enjoy wealth and glory. If Xiao Zijin did not even give her food to eat, she would be miserable. There was a big difference between eating something you didn't like and not being able to eat. Ning Shu bowed and sadly said, Your Highness, this concubine never thought of occupying my elder sister's position, nor did I want to erase her traces. Elder sister is Hong-er's mother and this concubine is Hong-er's aunt. This concubine did this because I don't want your highness to be immersed in sorrow. You must take care of your body. Elder sister is watching you from the sky. The sky is watching you, since your highness doesn't like the things this concubine makes, this concubine will make less of these things in the future so that your highness won't be angry. This concubine will leave. Ning Shu finished speaking and slipped away. Xiao Zijin did not say a word from beginning to end. He just looked at the broken pieces and pastries on the ground. His heart was very stifled. How could a person who used to be taciturn talk so much now? And her respectful attitude, every time she spoke, there was a trace of sarcasm. But he really did not have the qualifications to scold her or not to let her mention Shuang-er. That was the most infuriating part. Xiao Zijin was angry. He felt that Ning Ani had come between them. Ning Ani had destroyed his relationship with Shuang-er. Although he was the one who took the initiative to propose, this anger was vented on Ning Ani. Ning Shu returned to the courtyard. Mama Li quickly asked Ning Shu, how was it? Did His Highness eat? Ning Shu shook his head, he smashed the things. Mammy Li's face darkened. This was completely expected. His Highness clearly likes peach blossom cakes, but you insist on making a plum blossom cake. What does the prince think? You're deliberately going against me. You won't give me what I like, but you insist on giving me what I don't like. It was normal to be angry. Looking at Ning Shu who didn't take it seriously, Mammy Li shook her head. The princess was seeking death, a big death. His Highness was originally thinking about the former princess consort. He didn't love her at first, but now His Highness was disgusted by her. The days ahead were definitely going to be tough. The servants below all worshipped the high and trampled on the low. It was also because this princess consort had never suffered before. Once she did, she would definitely learn to be obedient. Mammy Lee didn't bother to remind her. Some people had water in their heads. They had to cry for a while and shed some tears to get the water out of their heads. Then they would learn to be obedient. Therefore, Mammy Lee no longer interfered with Ning Shu's affairs. She didn't ask what Ning Shu ate, nor did she give any opinion on what he wore. As for the hair bun and headwear, I won't comment on it. You can do whatever you want. When she was down and desperate and had the idea of climbing up, she would cry and beg for help to stand up and live a normal life again. She was proud and arrogant. Reality taught her how to be a person. Ning Shu was a little surprised. Why did Mammy Lee, who was so naggy before, suddenly become quiet and silent? After thinking for a while, he understood Mammy Lee's thoughts. When she was down and out, Mammy Lee would reach out to her. At this time, if there was a life-saving straw in front of her, she would definitely grasp it tightly. Mammy Lee would say whatever she wanted. It was very easy to teach her. Everyone was good at playing psychological warfare. Ning Shu didn't care about Mammy Lee's plan. He would wear what he should wear and eat every day. Usually, when he practiced peerless martial arts, he would absorb a little power of the sun. The client's meridians were very narrow. They were not the bones for practicing martial arts. Although the absorption was slow, at least he could absorb a little. The power of the sun was a little irritable. Sometimes when he practiced, it would hurt his meridians. However, after practicing the power of the sun, the most obvious effect was that he was not so afraid of the cold. His body was always warm, and his hands and feet were no longer cold. It was enough to get through the winter without using charcoal. However, when the period came, it was very painful. Ning Shu's lower body was rustling, and he pinched the acupoints with his hands. It was very painful. The infertility decoction hurt the client's body. She was a little girl who had never given birth. Her menstrual cramps were very serious. When she was in pain, she trembled and broke out in a cold sweat. When she was in pain, Ning Shu gnashed his teeth. She was in so much pain, and he wanted to let Xiao Zijin feel the pain. I'm in so much pain. Help me get a doctor. Ning Shu said to Mammy Lee. Mammy Lee's face was cold. She bowed and said, "You have to ask His Highness. If His Highness agrees, you can get a doctor." Ning Shu gathered the power of the sun in his palm and slowly rubbed his stomach. The warm hand rubbed his stomach and made him feel more comfortable. Mammy Lee went to ask Xiao Zijin, and then came back to tell Ning Shu that His Highness was not in the mansion. Since His Highness was not in the mansion, he could not go out to get a doctor. He stood aside and watched Ning Shu lying in bed. Instead, he prepared a hot water bottle for Ning Shu and asked her to cover her feet. Nanny Lee wrung the handkerchief and wiped the sweat on Ning Shu's head. She said softly, "Wang Fei, why do you have to compete with His Highness? If you make His Highness angry, you will be the one to suffer. Since you married over, did His Highness give you the dowry of the inner courtyard? You are actually an unworthy princess. You have the right to be a housekeeper in the mansion. You have to rely on His Highness if you want to establish a majesty in the mansion. So you show weakness by retreating in order to advance. If you are so stubborn, you will not only lose your relationship as husband and wife, but also make the servants look down on you. Take your illness as an example. If Princess were the one in charge of the food in the backyard, the housekeeper would have asked someone to get a doctor. If His Highness doesn't care, the servants will despise you. Princess, don't you understand?" Ning Shu listened to Mammy Lee's words and thought it made sense. What Mammy Lee said made sense, but he didn't listen. Ning Shu's hot hand pressed against his stomach, and the pain was not so strong. After the ant flow left, Ning Shu would do whatever he wanted. He would go to Xiao Zijin and remind her that it would be the death anniversary of Xiao Zijin in a few days. I have prepared a lot of things. His Highness must not forget the death anniversary of Xiao Zijin. His wife died less than a year ago, and he married someone else. How could he still be affectionate? Xiao Zijin's temples bulged and her face trembled. Every time she mentioned Shuang, she felt that this woman was laughing at him. It seemed that she was mocking his relationship with Shuang. Xiao Zijin's face turned black. What qualifications did she have to teach her? Xiao Zijin was really tired of a person who kept talking in her ear, /BK. Chapter 2755. Every time they talked, there would be words like Shuang, sister like this, sister like that. This made Xiao Zijin irritated. Especially recently, Xiao Zijin found that he seemed to be unable to draw his wife's face. His wife's face actually slowly weakened in his impression. It became more and more blurry, which made Xiao Zijin very painful. People had the ability to heal and forget. Some memories that were too painful, the human brain chose to forget. Xiao Zijin was still drawing his wife, but he felt that the drawing was a little different from his impression. He couldn't remember what was different. There were some details that he couldn't remember, such as his wife's eyes. The drawing felt wrong. Xiao Zijin was annoyed. There was also a woman who wore red and purple every day, reminding him that the death anniversary was coming. Since it was the death anniversary, don't wear such gaudy clothes. The death anniversary was coming, shouldn't you wear plain clothes? Every time he looked, Xiao Zijin felt his eyes hurt. For his eyes and ears, Xiao Zijin directly grounded Ning Shu. As for the duration of the confinement, he didn't know. When he would let him out depended on his mood. He didn't want to argue. Ning Shu was grounded, but he wasn't anxious at all. He did what he wanted to do every day. The most direct manifestation was that there was less charcoal. If there was no charcoal in winter, people would freeze to death. After absorbing the power of the fire, his body was warm and comfortable. He didn't care at all whether there was charcoal or not. When the food was bad, Ning Shu went to get food himself. In the middle of the night, he gave himself special treatment. The client did not have many trustworthy people around him. There was no one he could trust with his heart. There was a servant girl from her maternal family. In the end, it was the client's mother who taught her well. Every time, she passed on news to the Ning family. If she had anything, the servant girl would pass on the news. Now, she had fallen out of favor and was grounded. The mistress of the Ning family, the client's mother, passed on a letter to Ning Shu, telling her not to cause trouble, to serve the prince well, and to take good care of Hong. Don't go around every day. Think about your maternal family. Ning Shu received the letter. After reading it, he lit the fire and stuffed it into the hole of the stove. The weather was cold and the firewood was not good. She missed her husband's family, her maternal family, and her nephew. Who would miss her? She didn't care about anyone now. The person she married was like water that was poured out. If anything happened in the future, her maiden family would probably hide far away. There was no such thing as her maternal family supporting her. Pleasing the prince is the most important thing. You've already married into a noble family. What else do you want with such a good husband? Don't be greedy. However, the Ning family had raised Ning Ani, so Ning Ani couldn't refuse his family's arrangement. Ning Shu read the letter from Mistress Ning and used it to ignite the fire. She would live her life the way she should. On the day of Ning Shu's death, Ning Shu took off his red and purple clothes and changed into plain clothes. He went to burn incense in front of Ning Anshuang's memorial tablet. Xiao Zijin was carrying her child when she saw Ning Shu walking over. He was wearing simple and elegant clothes. She was so distracted that she almost thought that Shuang had returned. She couldn't help but walk closer to take a look. She discovered it was Ning Ani. The current Ning Ani was becoming less and less like Shuang. If there was some resemblance in the past, then now, even if they were wearing clothes of the same color. They looked alike from afar, but the difference in their faces was too great. The corners of her eyes were raised a little. When she raised her eyebrows and looked at people, she gave people a sharp and sonorous feeling. In the past, Ning Ani was a quiet woman. Now that she deliberately went against him, she had changed a lot. Ning Shu saw Hong in her arms and immediately said with a smile, "Hong is so beautiful today." He reached out and pinched Hong small and tender hand. Then he covered his face with his hand and sobbed sadly. If sister saw that Hong was so beautiful, she would be very pleased. Sister, why did you leave so early?" Ning Shu's sobs drifted in the room, giving a gloomy feeling. Xiao Zijin was speechless. Crazy. The princess is not in good health. She will be grounded in the future to take care of her body. Xiao Zijin ignored Ning Shu's sobs and said directly to Nanny Li, "Look after the princess." Nanny Li was speechless. The princess's ability to court death was beyond her expectations. She was already very sad, but Nanny Li still deliberately poked at her sore spot. Was she here to show weakness or to deliberately disgust her? Ning Shu was grounded again. In the evening, Ning Shu opened the wardrobe and put on the clothes that Ning Anshuang liked to wear. He put on a little makeup. As for what Ning Anshuang looked like, Ning Shu could only rely on the memory of the person who commissioned him and the painting of Ning Anshuang by Xiao Zijin. Relying on rough makeup tools, Ning Shu painted himself to be 80% similar to Ning Anshuang. The most important thing was that the two of them looked a little alike. Ning Shu's hair was disheveled and he arrived outside Xiao Zijin's room like a ghost. Why did she love this method recently? Why did she like to scare people? But there was no ghost knocking on the door. Ning Shu climbed in through the window and suddenly remembered that he didn't know if he could use the space law in this world. If he used the space channel, he was afraid that he could appear in front of Xiao Zijin out of thin air. Ning Shu used his spiritual power to find the space node and then built the space channel. Then, Ning Shu suddenly disappeared and then suddenly appeared beside Xiao Zijin's bed. Ning Shu pinched his throat and imitated Ning Anshuang's voice. He softly shouted, Jin Lang, wake up." Xiao Zijin felt that there was someone beside the bed and suddenly woke up. If it was an assassin, he would probably be dead by now. Under the cold moonlight, Xiao Zijin saw a woman with disheveled hair sitting by his bed. Her plain clothes were a little scary in the night. Xiao Zijin broke out in a cold sweat and quickly pulled out the dagger under the pillow. Ning Shu immediately pinched his throat and said, "It's me, Jin Lang, don't you remember me?" Xiao Zijin was a little hesitant. "Is it Shuang He? Shuang He, am I dreaming?" "It's me. Shuang He." Xiao Zijin excitedly reached out to grab Ning Shu, but Ning Shu took 2 steps back. "Jin Lang, you don't love me anymore. Why did you marry someone else and marry my sister?" Xiao Zijin hurriedly said, "Shuang He, this king has no choice. Royal grandfather will definitely force me to get married. I thought that your sister would be able to take good care of Hong He, but I didn't expect her to be completely different from you." Ning Shu. "You're just looking for an excuse. The emperor dotes on you so much, he wouldn't force you to get married without giving you a year. But who asked me to love you? Jin Lang, I'll be leaving first. I don't have much time left. I'll come back to see you." As Ning Shu spoke, he constructed a tunnel that led to the door and then suddenly disappeared in front of Xiao Zijin. He disappeared just like that. Xiao Zijin's eyes almost popped out. Disappeared just like that? Shuang He. Xiao Zijin chased towards the door and directly bumped into it. His forehead was bruised. It wasn't a dream. Did Shuang He's soul really appear? It disappeared in an instant. /BK Chapter 2756. Xiao Zijin didn't believe in this kind of thing, but only ghosts had such an ability. Xiao Zijin felt a chill run down her spine, especially when she heard the resentful voice saying, "You don't love me anymore, you've forgotten about me." It made her hair stand on end. He was looking forward to Xuan Er coming back to see him, but when he saw her, Xiao Zijin felt that it was so scary. Ning Shu returned to his room, took off his clothes, washed off his makeup and lay on the bed to sleep. For the next few nights, Ning Shu went to find Xiao Zijin. Xiao Zijin sat by the bed and waited for Xuan Er. Every time Xuan Er suddenly appeared and disappeared, Xiao Zijin's heart thumped heavily, and the feeling of fear grew stronger. There was a piercing feeling, and it was very uncomfortable. Ning Shu pinched his throat and repeated over and over again, "You don't love me, when I die, you immediately marry someone else." His repeated complaints made Xiao Zijin feel uncomfortable. "How did I not love you? I thought about you every day, and for you, I married a sister who looked like you." Did he not feel wronged, hurt, or sad? Hearing Xiao Zijin's drawing, Ning Shu smiled. His smile did not show his teeth, and was elegant and calm. But it made Xiao Zijin shiver, imagining that he was a ghost, smiling at her elegantly without showing his teeth. "Jean Lang, I know you still love me, I want to be with you forever." "Jean Lang, do you still remember the past, Jean Lang, to be able to see you again, I am so happy." Ning Shu had heard many stories about the late princess consort, and reminisced about the past. For the next few days, the lover of Xiao Zijin's dreams appeared, and he stayed up late every night to wait for Xuan Er's soul. Although he was a ghost, he was still the grandson of the true dragon, the son of heaven, and should not be able to hurt him. But it was still creepy, especially when the other party's tone became more and more bitter and painful. Hell only has endless darkness, there are many souls, and the souls kill and devour each other. There are also many skeletons, and they can destroy the souls at any time. There is a giant yiksha that grabs countless souls and stuffs them into its mouth to eat. It is ferocious and terrifying. Jean Lang, it wasn't easy for me to escape. I wanted to return to your side. Xiao Zijin was speechless. He didn't feel much happiness, only horror. Xiao Zijin was frightened by Ning Shu's description of hell. When she saw her lover's hair spread open, he looked no different from a malicious spirit. It was extremely terrifying. But she was the one he loved after all. In the end, Xiao Zijin still invited the monk to her home, saying that it was to perform a ritual for her deceased wife. Purify the souls of the dead. In private, he told these monks that if it was possible, they should directly suppress it. In any case, it was better not to appear again. After the monk released the souls from purgatory, he invited a Taoist priest over. In short, he went through a lot of trouble. Ning Shu only looked on coldly. He really couldn't stand Xiao Zijin's affectionate look. Now that he had invited monks and Taoist priests, he did not want to be haunted by ghosts anymore. Ning Shu didn't care that he was grounded. He rushed in front of Xiao Zijin, wanting to say something but hesitated. She stared at Xiao Zijin. Xiao Zijin was a little annoyed by her gaze. "What are you doing? Aren't you grounded?" Ning Shu's expression was strange. "Your Highness," Qinxie saw elder sister. Xiao Zijin's expression turned ugly. "What are you talking about?" Ning Shu's face was anxious. "It's true. Qinxie really saw elder sister. Elder sister looked at me without saying anything." "Your Highness, you didn't see elder sister." "No." Ning Shu's expression was speechless. He was conflicted and afraid. "Your Highness, you have to believe Qinxie. Qinxie really saw elder sister. You're the person she loves, how could you not see elder sister?" "Your Highness, let's go together tonight. We'll definitely see elder sister." Xiao Zijin didn't want to stay with her. Xuan Er already blamed him for marrying someone else. If he stayed with this woman, What if Shuang went crazy? What if she turned into a malicious spirit? Stay in your room. If there's nothing important, don't come looking for this prince. Withdraw. Ning Shu stood there without moving. This prince wants you to withdraw. Ning Shu then walked away shyly, giving Xiao Zijin a splitting headache. Ning Anshuang had been dead for a year, but she started to cause trouble a few days after her death. At night, Xiao Zijin asked the Taoist priest to lie in ambush and wait for Ning Anshuang's arrival. The Taoist priest was speechless. He was a feng shui practitioner. If someone was sick, he would get some talisman water to drink. He had never seen a ghost before. But seeing how confident his sugar daddy was, he decided to put on a show with him. Since there was money to be had, why not? Ning Shu scanned with his mental energy and knew what Xiao Zijin wanted to do. Letting the Taoist priest hide on the roof beam, was he trying to make Ning Anshuang's soul dissipate? However, Ning Shu still had to go. This time, he put on a scary makeup. It was obvious that he had turned black. He had become a malicious spirit. Ning Shu soaked her hands in the ice water so that her hands were bone-chillingly cold, without any warmth. In this kind of weather, a basin of water would freeze. It was bone-chilling. Through the spatial tunnel, he suddenly appeared in Xiao Zijin's room. The Taoist priest was speechless. Fuck, there really was a ghost. The Taoist priest almost peed his pants and fell from the roof beam. His first reaction was to run. Jin Lang, you actually found someone to deal with me. How can you do this to me? Ning Shu appeared in front of Xiao Zijin in a flash. Without giving Xiao Zijin a chance to speak or resist, he reached out and grabbed his neck tightly. Xiao Zijin suddenly felt a pair of cold hands choking his neck. It was so cold that he had goosebumps all over his body. Then, he couldn't breathe. His lungs hurt like needles, and his face turned red. He wanted to pry her hands away. The Taoist priest on the roof beam was stunned. After a while, he reacted and shouted, "Demon, don't harm others." The Taoist priest jumped down from the roof beam and waved his peachwood sword at Ning Shu. The ghost seemed to be afraid of the peachwood sword and quickly let go. Xiao Zijin, who was about to suffocate to death, could finally breathe. She coughed until tears fell. Her face was purple and she curled up into a ball. The Taoist priest saw that the peachwood sword in his hand was useful. He stood in front of Xiao Zijin and stared at Ning Shu with trembling legs. Ning Shu's voice was bitter and sinister. Jin Lang, do you want to kill me? Don't you love me the most? Why are you doing this to me? Cough cough, you want to kill this king too. Xiao Zijin looked at Ning Shu's version of Ning Anshuang. Her eyes were filled with fear. Her gentleness and affection were gone. Jin Lang, haven't you been missing me? I've appeared now. I escaped from hell to find you. Why are you doing this to me? Ning Shu's voice was especially bitter and sinister. His voice was very sharp, making people's ears uncomfortable. Taoist priest, and it was a malicious spirit that escaped from hell/BK. Chapter 2757. Damn, I was just going through the motions. I didn't expect there to really be a ghost. What should I do now? Should I just run away? But the person behind him had a high position and he couldn't afford to offend him. Ning Anshuang's tone became low again, with a pitiful pleading tone, Jin Lang, I have nowhere else to go now. If I'm caught, I'll have to endure endless torture in hell. In order to come and see you, I escaped. Now that you don't want me and don't want me, what do you want me to do? What should I do? The faint cry gave people goosebumps. Jin Lang, I can only come and find you. Other than you, I have nothing. Xiao Zijin's neck was choked and it was difficult for her to speak. Seeing that the priest was standing there, she pushed him. What was he doing? Quickly solve it. The priest was pushed very close to Ning Shu. Ning Shu glanced at him indifferently. The priest was so scared that he jumped out of the window and ran. Ning Shu said happily to Xiu Zijin, "Jin Lang, there are no outsiders hindering us now. Jin Lang, are you willing to be with me?" Xiu Zijin reached into the pillow. Under the pillow was the blessed jade pendant given by the monk. It should be useful. "Jin Lang, other than you, I have nothing else to ask for. I just want to be with you." Xiu Zijin said with difficulty, "If I die, what will happen to Hong Er? Hong Er has no one to take care of him." "That's easy to solve. Let Hong Er come with us. Let's be a family of 3, okay?" Ning Shu coaxed. "Of course not." Xiu Zijin took out the jade pendant and faced Ning Shu. Ning Shu was speechless. "Okay, I'll give you some face. I'm afraid of this thing." Ning Shu disappeared in an instant and appeared outside the room. She rubbed her brows and ran away like a cat. She returned to her room and changed her clothes. She lay on the bed and rubbed her brows. Her head hurt so much. It was as if her body had been emptied. Her mental energy was exhausted. She went in and out and then her mental energy was not enough. If it was just a scan, the entire Wang Manor would be within its range. However, to construct a spatial tunnel, it would take a long time before his mental power was completely depleted. The next day, Ning Shu looked like he was about to die. He insisted on going to see Xiu Zijin. Xiu Zijin's neck was bruised from being strangled. It was only because it was winter that her neck was covered in furry fur that it was not visible. "Your Highness, shut up." Xiu Zijin's hoarse voice stopped Ning Shu from speaking. It was nothing more than seeing his sister. He didn't want to hear these words right now. He didn't want to hear a certain name either. She was simply deranged. She actually wanted to kill him and Hong Er. He had become an evil ghost. Ning Shu sighed and said, "Sister cried to me, saying that you don't want her anymore because she's a ghost. Although humans and ghosts walk different paths, sister still loves you. Let her stay by your side. No one will see it anyway." Ning Shu had done a quest before. A ghost king was by a girl's side, and the girl accepted it. In the end, the ghost king died, and it died with the girl. But why didn't Xiu Zijin accept Ning Anshuang's soul? That ghost king was very handsome, but Ning Anshuang was also very beautiful. Women were emotional and paid more attention to love. But for Xiu Zijin, men paid more attention to themselves, their lives and safety. "Shut up, Sai, Your Highness," sister said that she doesn't blame you. "But why did you let the Taoist priest and the monk take her in and destroy her soul?" "Shut up," Xiu Zijin stared at Ning Shu with red eyes. "Ning Shu, it's not easy." Finally, he didn't put on an affectionate look to disgust people. Ning Shu's eyes were dark, as if he hadn't slept for a few days and nights. But Xiu Zijin's expression was much uglier than Ning Shu's. A haggard duo. After telling Ning Shu to scram, Xiu Zijin directly burned all the portraits in the room, not leaving a single one behind. Now that Xiu Zijin saw these paintings, the image of a ferocious ghost with a head full of hair appeared in her mind. Ning Shu saw that he couldn't wait to eliminate the traces of Ning Anshuang's existence. He set fire to these portraits and burned them all. In the future, not to mention pretending to be affectionate, he probably wouldn't even want to mention it. Ning Shu apologized to Ning Anshuang, who didn't know if she had reincarnated in the world of reincarnation. This guy's pretending to be affectionate was really disgusting. This time, Ning Shu wore the clothes that Ning Anshuang liked every day. They were all simple and elegant clothes. He combed Ning Anshuang's hair into a bun and wore a head accessory that was very similar to Ning Anshuang's. From afar, he looked no different from Ning Anshuang. Ning Shu dressed up like this in front of Xiu Zijin. "Send some peach blossom cakes." Don't you like peach blossom cakes? I'll send you peach blossom cakes. Xiao Zijin looked at Ning Shu, who looked like his wife, and her heart skipped a beat. A malicious spirit appeared in broad daylight. But on closer inspection, it wasn't Ning Anshuang. She then saw the peach blossom cakes she sent over. Why are you sending peach blossom cakes now? He didn't want to eat them. Why aren't you wearing red and purple clothes now? This woman must be doing it on purpose. To be honest, Xiao Zijin suspected that this woman was pretending to be a ghost. But how could an ordinary person do that? She disappeared from the room without even opening the door. Every time he closed the door properly, she still came and went as she pleased. Other than ghosts, Xiao Zijin couldn't find any other explanation. Ning Anshuang really came back from hell. But why was his heart so strange? In the eyes of a modern man, his ex-girlfriend had come back to pester him. He only wanted to get rid of her, but there was no love. He loved her before, but now he didn't love her anymore. Ning Shu lowered his head and said softly, "This is my sister's request. She wants to borrow my hand to prepare peach blossom cakes for the prince and wear the clothes that the prince likes." Xiao Zijin, where is your sister now? Ning Shu raised his head and said blankly, "I don't know. I never know where she is. Sometimes she comes to find me." Your Highness, tell her properly. She is very sad. She gave up the chance to reincarnate and came back because she couldn't let go of you. Don't you want to be with her? Shut up, Ning Shu sighed. She was also very tired. The person was her and the ghost was her. One person was playing two roles. If she wasn't careful, she would be exposed. But now Xiao Zijin believed that his deceased wife was back. In the future, don't send food to this king. Don't wear your sister's clothes. Xiao Zijin told Ning Shu to take the things away. He was not in good spirits and was a little afraid of the dark. The day was calm, but in the dead of night, her ghost came out. He was strangled. At that time, he was really about to die. Ning Anshuang's ghost really wanted to kill him. Regarding this, Ning Shu said that he wouldn't let him die so strangely. Even if something happened, it wouldn't be this kind of ghost story. Saint wouldn't believe it. Once night fell, Xiao Zijin ordered the guards to surround her room to protect her inside and outside. Many people made him brave. /BK Chapter 2758. Xiao Zijin arranged a lot of guards to surround her courtyard. Even a fly wouldn't be able to fly in with 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. But Xiao Zijin knew that it was useless. After all, the other party was a ghost that appeared and disappeared unpredictably. Xiao Zijin sat by the bed. All sorts of magic tools and talismans were placed within reach of her hand. If Ning Anshuang really came, these talismans and magic tools would be of some use. The surroundings were quiet, and there was a stifling feeling that a storm was coming. Xiao Zijin sat on a chair, not sleeping, waiting for Ning Anshuang. He was really tired and didn't want to be entangled with Ning Anshuang anymore. Ning Anshuang, who had already died once, was a little different from the Ning Anshuang when she was alive. She was paranoid and terrifying. She actually wanted to kill him and let him be with her in the form of a ghost. How was that possible? Whether it was for or for himself, he would not die. Xiao Zijin touched her neck. Even now, it was still very painful. When she looked in the mirror, she could see the terrifying bruise on her neck. That pair of ice-cold hands were strangling his neck. He really wanted to kill him. With so many people guarding Xiao Zijin, Ning Shu naturally wouldn't go over. However, he constructed a spatial tunnel from his courtyard to Xiao Zijin's room. The distance was too long. She didn't have the mental strength to construct such a long tunnel. If something went wrong midway and Xiao Zijin suspected her, everything would be for naught. Ning Shu lay on the warm bed and slept soundly. Let Xiao Zijin wait for a ghost. Xiao Zijin waited for 3 nights, but she didn't see even half a ghost. She couldn't take it anymore. She leaned against the bed and fell asleep. Then, she suddenly woke up. She couldn't take it anymore and fell asleep again. But not long after, she suddenly woke up again. She was worried that if she fell asleep, Ning Anshuang's ghost would come and strangle her. However, even when dawn approached, she still didn't see Ning Anshuang. There was no need to mention how sullen Xiao Zijin's heart was. Such a big lineup, waiting for Ning Anshuang to come, but she didn't come. He stayed up all night, but in the end, he didn't see her. Xiao Zijin felt as if her fist had landed on cotton and she wanted to vomit blood. Ning Anshuang's ghost did not appear. He should have heaved a sigh of relief, but instead, he felt even more uncomfortable. It was as if he had fallen into the air. He didn't know when she would appear. Would she appear during the day or at night? Why was she so willful? Could it be that he knew that there were too many people outside, so he decided not to come? The dark circles under Xiao Zijin's eyes were quite serious, and she didn't have much energy. Could it be that he would have to live in fear every day in the future? If he didn't deal with Ning Anshuang, he wouldn't be able to live a peaceful life in the future. He was the one who was most unwilling to cross swords with Ning Anshuang. After all, they were so in love when they were alive. Why was it that after being separated by yin and yang, they were still harming each other? Xiao Zijin sighed. She let the maid help her freshen up and prepared to go to court. In any case, he had to go to court. He had to do the things the emperor gave him well, but his family was still worrying. Recently, he hadn't had a good rest, so he was in a bad mood. His heart felt like it was going to burst into flames at any moment. Lack of sleep leads to emotional instability. Xiao Zijin went to court. When the emperor saw him like this, he felt both heartache and gratification. He guessed that his grandson had stayed up all night to complete the task he had given him. The emperor rewarded him for this, causing Xiao Zijin's uncles to look at him with unkind eyes. However, in front of the emperor, they still had to act as if they were proud of their nephew. The emperor's praise was not a good thing for Xiao Zijin, nor could it ease the anxiety in her heart. Moreover, she couldn't tell anyone about this. Even if she told them, they might not believe her. It was uncomfortable to hold it in alone. There was another person at home who saw a ghost, but Xiao Zijin didn't treat Ning Ani as herself. Recently, Xiao Zijin had been wantonly recruiting Jianghu practitioners. Taoist priests and monks were all pulled into the palace to eat and drink well. It was so that these people could quickly get rid of Ning Anshuang's ghost. These Jianghu practitioners were only good at talking. They didn't have much ability. Even if they did, they would only be watching over the house for others. They wouldn't have much ability to do so. Ning Shu still wore simple and elegant clothes every day, almost exactly the same as Ning Anshuang's, and moved closer to Xiao Zijin. Xiao Zijin, right now, he would rather see her wearing bright red and purple clothes than Ning Anshuang's clothes. From afar, this kind of clothes looked like a ghost. Your Highness, are you going to kill sister? Ning Shu's face was filled with anxiety. Your Highness, if you do this, sister won't dare to approach you. Xiao Zijin asked, have you seen your sister? Ning Shu nodded, I've seen her before, but she doesn't dare to approach you now. She told me to tell you to disperse these monks and Taoists. She wants to say a few words to you. It's not a good idea to avoid meeting like this. If there's anything, just say it out loud. If you do this, big sister will be very angry. I don't know what she will do. When Xiao Zijin heard this, she would not withdraw the monks and Taoists. If she really did not have the heart to hurt him, why would she be afraid of these monks and Taoists? Ning Shu's mouth twitched as he sighed with a haggard face. He brought out the tonic soup. Your Highness, please drink some medicine. Recently, you have been working hard, your body will not be able to take it. Ning Shu poured out another bowl from the goo and drank a mouthful, indicating that there was no poison. Xiao Zijin only drank 2 mouthfuls. Recently, she had been staying up late, and her mouth was filled with delicious food. She did not have much of an appetite, so she could not eat anything. Xiao Zijin drank half a bowl before stopping. Your Highness, this tonic soup was taught to me by Big Sister. Big Sister said that recently, when she saw that your Highness had lost weight, she felt pain in her heart. Pfft. Xiao Zijin directly spat out the soup, wishing that she could spit out the medicine she drank. Not everyone could accept that the person they loved had become an alien. Xiao Zijin could not accept it, especially when the person she once loved wanted to kill her. Xiao Zijin immediately felt a little disgusted. After drinking the soup, she felt as if she had eaten chili, and her stomach was burning with pain. Of course, this was just Xiao Zijin's psychological effect. Xiao Zijin's face turned green. In the end, she left in a huff. She went to the latrine, clasped her throat, and vomited out the tonic soup. Ning Shu drank his tea with a smile. Xiao Zijin came back with an indifferent expression. She was a little dizzy and said to Ning Ani, I have dismissed the guards, monks, and Taoists. Tell your big sister that we need to have a good talk. Ning Shu nodded, Your Highness, this concubine understands. This concubine will definitely tell big sister. Chapter 2759. Ning Shu wanted to say something but hesitated. Xiao Zijin asked impatiently, Is there anything else? Ning Shu said, Your Highness, do you want to send someone to guard Qinxia's courtyard? Qinxia feels that elder sister is also angry at Qinxia. What if elder sister wants to kill Qinxia? Ning Shu was worried. Your Highness, you have to protect Qinxia. You are sisters. She won't do anything to you. She really hates this prince. Xiao Zijin refused to send anyone to protect Ning Ani. If Ning Shu didn't take the initiative to mention it, Xiao Zijin might still be able to send someone to protect her. But since she took the initiative to mention it, Xiao Zijin definitely wouldn't send anyone to protect her. Whether it was Ning Anshuang's death or Xiao Zijin marrying Ning Ani, she felt that this person was sandwiched between the two people who loved each other. Now that Ning Anshuang had come out to cause trouble, Ning Ani was actually still the target of her anger. Ning Shu wanted to say something but hesitated. He looked like he was constipated. Alright, you can leave. Xiao Zijin didn't care about Ning Ani's life or death. If in the past, she still had the intention to let her learn a little from her elder sister. Now, there was no need at all. The white moonlight in her heart had become white rice in her mouth. Her only value was that she looked a little like her deceased wife. Now, her only value was gone. After dealing with Ning Anshuang, Ning Ani also had to be dealt with. However, 2 of his wives had died in less than 2 years. It wasn't good for his reputation. He could be fed, but it was impossible for him to have the honor of being a princess. Ning Shu left with a worried expression. At night, there were no guards outside Xiao Zijin's room. Although there were no guards, there were many monks and Taoists lying in ambush. There were people hiding on the beams, under the bed, in the screen, and in the cupboard. If it really was a ghost, it would definitely be able to sense the aura of a living person. Ning Shu changed his clothes and made his face pale. His lips were pitch black. This makeup was quite impactful. Ning Shu seemed to have found Xiao Zijin's courtyard and swaggered to the door. The people lying in ambush all held their breaths. They didn't expect a female ghost to really appear. His worldview was shaking. Ning Shu suddenly disappeared and then appeared in front of Xiao Zijin. Xiao Zijin pretended to be calm as she drew, but a drop of ink dripped onto the paper. His hands were trembling. Xiao Zijin put down the brush and put her hands behind her back. She said to Ning Shu, Xuan, you're here. Ning Shu's lips suddenly split into a smile. His lips were pitch black, and his teeth were snow white. His smile was especially horrifying. Jin Lang, I'm here. Ning Shu walked towards Xiao Zijin, and Xiao Zijin quickly retreated. Ning Shu immediately put on a wronged and twisted face. Jin Lang, are you afraid of me? I won't hurt you, I can't bear to. Who the hell was strangling his neck? Xiao Zijin's deep feelings were completely trampled. Xuan, our fate is already over. Haven't you thought of reincarnating as a human? There's no point in us being entangled like this. Let's meet in the next life, okay? Ning Shu shook his head. No, I don't know what the next life will be like. Furthermore, if I return to hell, I will definitely be eaten by Yiksha. Isn't it good for us to be together? Be like me, become an existence with eternal life. We can be together forever. Jin Lang, didn't you say that we will be together forever? Xiao Zijin didn't know how to ridicule. What was the point of becoming a ghost? She couldn't eat or drink. She couldn't enjoy anything. What was the point of this eternal life? Being together forever was when they were alive. It didn't count when they were dead. Ning Shu walked towards Xiao Zijin step by step. Jin Lang, are you willing to be together with me? If you become like me, no one will be able to see us. We can go to any place we want to go. Isn't that good? No. Xiao Zijin directly refused. Xuan, our fate is already over. You should go to hell to be reincarnated. Maybe we can still be together in the next life. In the end, you just don't want to be together with me. What about the oath we made before? What about the sea running dry and the rocks rotting? You can't do it. Why did you make a promise? Xiao Zijin heard his deceased wife accuse him again and again. She used the past to question him. Xiao Zijin's heart was only filled with impatience. A dead person is like an extinguished lamp. You're already dead. Why do you still insist on living? Xuan, I don't want to hurt you. You should go. What if I don't go? Xiao Zijin's eyes were filled with pain. Then don't blame me for being heartless. Xiao Zijin grabbed the teacup on the desk and smashed it on the ground. The people hiding in the surroundings immediately rushed into the room. The people under the bed and the cupboard all came out and surrounded Ning Shu. These monks and Taoists also stared at Ning Shu in horror. No one dared to step forward. Ning Shu shouted mournfully, Jin Lang, why are you doing this to me? Why? Ning Shu's hair spread open and stretched out a vine as thick as a finger. It couldn't be helped. The plane suppression was too strong. It was already not easy to have a vine as thick as a finger. And it consumed a lot of energy. These vines wrapped around these Taoists and monks. Some of the more timid Taoists were so scared that they wet their pants. This was clearly a world-shattering scene. Someone could actually control the vines. Ning Shu felt the law imprint between her thumb and index finger start to heat up. She stared at Xiao Zijin with hatred. Jin Lang, no matter what, I will not let you off. I want to be with you, forever and ever, never parting. When Xiao Zijin saw this scene, his face turned green. He was really panicking. Was there no way to kill the ghost? He had found so many capable people, but he didn't expect that the other party would use demonic arts to stop them. Jin Lang, be prepared to be entangled by me for the rest of your life. I love you so much that I crawled out of the bottomless hell just to see you. It's because I love you. My love for you transcends life and death. Even if I die, I will still come to your side, Jin Lang. When Xiao Zijin heard this, his face turned from green to white. There was an indescribable fear and horror on his face. Ning Anshuang, scram. Don't appear in front of this king. Otherwise, this king will definitely kill you. Xiao Zijin roared hysterically, scram, Ning Shu only said, "Jean Lang, no matter how angry you are, I will not let you go. I love you, you love me too. You said it before, you love me too. I can hear your longing and yearning for me, your muttering in front of my portrait. It was your words, your longing, that gave me the courage to climb out of hell. I thought you would be very happy to see me. Jean Lang, I'm very happy to see you again." Chapter 2760. Ning Shu was playing the role of a paranoid maniac, and a paranoid maniac at that. Xiao Zijin hugged his head. He was crazy, he loved living people, not dead people. Ning Shu constructed a spatial tunnel and ran away. After she left, the vines on the monk and Taoist loosened. They slid away through the windows and door like snakes. This scene challenged one's worldview. The monk and Taoist were trembling. The timid ones didn't say anything to Xiao Zijin and ran away. Some people endured the fear in their hearts and told Xiao Zijin that their cultivation was shallow and that they couldn't deal with such a powerful ghost. His Highness should find someone else. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Zijin was the only one left. There was no one around and it looked very desolate. Xiao Zijin flipped the table in anger. They were all trash who couldn't even deal with a woman. Xiao Zijin didn't expect that even after finding so many capable people, they still couldn't do anything to Ning Anshuang. To think that those monks and Taoists pretended to have high cultivation. In the end, when something happened, they ran faster than anyone else. Looking at Ning Anshuang's appearance, she probably wouldn't let him off and would keep pestering him. Now, Xiao Zijin was a little regretful. Why did he draw her for no reason? Why did he talk to the portrait for no reason? He said that he wanted to see her. Now, he really saw her. Xiao Zijin's heart was filled with anger. He had been pestered by ghosts all this time. Even eating and sleeping under the eyes of a ghost made Xiao Zijin's hair stand on end. Moreover, she wanted to kill him at all times. She wanted him to become a ghost and live with her forever. Damn, what kind of immortality was this? It was a scam. Xiao Zijin hadn't been eating or sleeping well recently. When he fell asleep, he would wake up abruptly. He always felt that there was a pair of eyes staring at him. It was as if a long tongue was sticking out and licking his cheeks. Just thinking about it made him tremble. Moreover, it would appear at random times. He didn't know when it would appear. Xiao Zijin wished that Ning Anshuang's soul would scatter and never be reincarnated. Xiao Zijin was busy, looking for a real exorcist master every day. Her son, who she had been holding in her hands before, rarely went to see him. He probably had a knot in his heart too. Loved the house and its crow, and also took his anger out on her. Xiao Zijin was best at venting her anger. Hong was the child of a malicious spirit. When he saw the child, he couldn't help but think of the child's mother. Xiao Zijin rarely came. Xiao Zijin didn't take care of Hong, so Ning Shu went to see the child every day. He hugged and coaxed him for half a day. Now that Hong was 1 year old, he could recognize people. When he saw Ning Shu, he would open his arms and let Ning Shu hug him. Ning Shu smiled and hugged him, then took out all kinds of little things to coax him. You have to start cultivating feelings and relying on each other from a young age. Since your biological father didn't care about you anymore, it was your stepmother who took care of you. Doing all this was nothing more than to make Ning Ani's life easier in the future so that everyone could live on the surface. In the future, if this child wanted reputation and face, he would not do anything to the person who entrusted him. However, when the child grew up, the client would be the woman with the highest status in the mansion. Just the word filial piety was enough to suppress him. Therefore, getting rid of Xiao Zijin was a matter of small capital and huge profits. Now, Xiao Zijin finally didn't pretend to be deeply in love. She looked as if she was the most infatuated person in the world. Every time he looked at her, he would lose his appetite. If she was really deeply in love, it would be fine. However, she pretended to be deeply in love. Then, he trained her to look like his wife. How affectionate. Xiao Zijin looked everywhere for eminent monks and exorcist masters. Ning Shu just smiled and didn't say anything. Even if they looked, they might not be able to find the ghost. He didn't know when that ghost would appear. After the new year, the weather gradually warmed up. This winter was the most difficult time for Xiao Zijin. Because she stayed up late, her face became thin and she lost a lot of weight. Ning Shu occasionally pretended to be a ghost, causing Xiao Zijin to live a life of being harassed by malicious spirits. When the emperor saw his grandson so dispirited, he thought that he was sick and told him to take care of his body. A few uncles teased that his nephew was still young and couldn't control himself when it came to women. With this appearance, the dark circles under his eyes, and the way he walked, wasn't it because he had stayed on a woman's body for too long? In any case, these people took the opportunity to add insult to injury. In any case, they tried their best to smear Xiao Zijin's reputation. There were also people who said that Xiao Zijin often ran outside after the new year. Could it be that she went to the brothel to find women? Some uncles even warned Xiao Zijin that the women outside were not clean and that it was easy for them to get sick. When the emperor heard this, he couldn't help but warn his grandson that if he really lacked women, he could give them to him. There was no need to go out and eat. Xiao Zijin's expression was incomparably ugly. She said that it wasn't because of women, and she didn't want any concubines. Women were too troublesome. The emperor still forcefully gave Xiao Zijin 2 palace maids with good looks. Xiao Zijin couldn't refuse and could only bring the 2 palace maids back to her residence. He really wasn't interested in women now. When he saw women, he thought of Ning Anshuang. How could a person change so much? Ning Anshuang, who wasn't dead, was gentle and virtuous with a noble temperament. How could she become like this after she died? Were all women so terrifying? Xiao Zijin directly threw the 2 women to Ning Shu for Ning Shu to deal with. This was definitely not because she believed in Ning Shu, but because she found it troublesome to deal with it herself. When the emperor asked, she would directly push it to the Wangfei in the backyard. Right now, Xiao Zijin didn't like Ning Anshuang. Of course, she also didn't like Ning Ani. These 2 sisters were both swindlers. Ning Shu looked at the 2 palace maids. He heard that the emperor had given them to Xiao Zijin, so he directly arranged for them to be Xiao Zijin's personal maids to take care of him. Xiao Zijin was speechless. Why were they arranged to be by his side again? Ning Shu said, "Your Highness, these are the people that the emperor gave you. It's probably because I have no children, so I arranged for people to give birth to your children. Your Highness, don't refuse." Xiao Zijin was annoyed. How could he be in the mood to play with women? When he saw women, he couldn't wait to take a detour. When Ning Anshuang saw the 2 women, she might strangle him again. Xiao Zijin was scared out of his wits. He didn't know when Ning Anshuang would appear and kill him. It was as if there was a sword hanging above his head. He didn't know when it would fall and chop off his head. He didn't dare to have any intimate actions with women. Xiao Zijin didn't want a malicious spirit to stand by the bed and stare at him while he was being intimate with a woman. Then he would probably be crippled. He didn't know if it was because the news of the Wang mansion had spread, but when he went to find people to catch the ghost, no one was willing to come. What the fuck? At this time, those uncles came to cause trouble again. Seeing these women, Xiao Zijin wanted to kill each of them with a sword. Chapter 2761. But this was a gift from the emperor, so she couldn't be killed. Xiao Zijin grabbed her hair. So annoying, so painful. The feeling of being entangled by a lunatic was terrible. And it was a lunatic who couldn't be killed, a paranoid ghost that crawled out of hell. Xiao Zijin complained more than once that she was sick. Humans and ghosts couldn't help but appear with just a thought. Don't give them to this prince. Deal with them. Xiao Zijin waved at Ning Shu in annoyance. Hearing this, the two palace maids turned pale with fright. Deal with them? How? Kill them. They thought that they came to the prince's mansion to be concubines, but they didn't expect that they would be dealt with the moment they arrived. They were palace maids with poor lives. Even if they died, no one would care. Ning Shu hesitated. Then Qinxie will teach them and send them to the prince's side. Ning Shu brought the two palace maids back to her courtyard and let the palace maids do the work of the servants. The two palace maids didn't dare to have any objections. They would do whatever they were told, as long as they weren't dealt with. Spring had arrived, and the spring planting was just around the corner. At this time, the emperor had to pray to the heavens for good weather and peace. The Ministry of Rites was extremely busy at this time. They had to prepare all kinds of things for the sacrifice, as well as the list of personnel and the positions of the officials. As a prince, Xiao Zijin naturally had to go out. Ning Shu felt that the sacrifice was an opportunity. The sacrifice was the obituary of the emperor and the empress to the heavens. The women with titles also had to go. The more people there were, the more sincere they would be. The place of the sacrifice was some distance away from the capital. When Ning Shu heard that they were going to sacrifice to the heavens, she immediately told Xiao Zijin that she also wanted to go. She was a princess, a daughter-in-law of the royal family. Xiao Zijin directly refused. In his heart, Ning Ani wasn't his wife. Ning Anshuang was his wife, but Ning Anshuang had changed beyond recognition. Ning Shu sighed and said, "Prince, if you leave, sister will definitely go with you. With Qinxie accompanying sister, sister won't disturb you when you're sacrificing to the heavens." Xiao Zijin, Ning Shu was finally able to offer sacrifices to the heavens, so he had already packed up his things. Before offering sacrifices to the heavens, they had to hunt and use the prey they hunted as sacrifices to the heavens. The more prey there was, the better. The fiercer the prey, the better. In short, before the sacrifice to the heavens, they would have a bloody massacre to show their sincerity to the heavens. After setting up tents in the forest, the imperial guards patrolled back and forth. The hunt would last for 3 days. In these 3 days, they would hunt as much prey as possible. At this time, many animals moved out. After the ice and snow melted, these animals came out to find food. They did not have to worry about not being able to hunt prey. This was an arena where the children of the various clans could display their strength, especially in front of the emperor. If they performed well and were to be valued by the emperor, wouldn't they be able to ascend to the heavens in a single step and become a close subject of the emperor? In short, a group of people were having a good time, using the excuse of offering sacrifices to the heavens. This involved a lot of benefits and face issues. However, none of this had anything to do with Ning Shu. She was just a woman of the inner chambers, and these matters of the imperial court had nothing to do with her. This time, she had to make sure that Xiao Zijin would not be able to climb up under so many pairs of eyes. If something happened, Xiao Zijin would not have a chance to fight for the throne, and he would also be able to ensure the prosperity of the prince's estate. Therefore, Xiao Zijin lived a half-dead life. This would make the emperor worry about him. Ning Shu was packing things in the tent. Xiao Zijin lifted the curtain and looked around the tent. He saw that there was no one else other than the maidservants and Ning Ani. For example, ghosts. Xiao Zijin had the maidservants leave and asked Ning Shu in a low voice, "Is your elder sister here?" Ning Shu shook her head. Elder sister did not appear. This concubine does not know whether she is here or not. But your highness, do not worry. Elder sister only thinks of you. She will definitely come back. Xiao Zijin, who wants her to come, he wished that she would never appear. If your elder sister appears, tell her that I have something important to do. If she comes out and gets in the way, this prince will not be with her even if I die, Xiao Zijin said coldly. Ning Shu nodded. This concubine understands. Your Highness, do not worry. This concubine will definitely instruct elder sister well. Xiao Zijin felt a headache coming on. When he thought about how there was a ghost everywhere in his life, his head hurt. Why didn't Ning Anshuang pester others and hurt others? If she really loved him, why didn't she help him get rid of those annoying people and kill them? If that was the case, his path to becoming the emperor would not be so difficult. Right, he could temporarily coax Ning Anshuang to help him deal with others. Rather than pestering him every day, he might as well find something for her to do. Not only could she help him, but she also did not have to be on guard against a ghost every day. Why did he have to go against her? Even if she was a ghost, he was still her husband. She should be obedient. He would stabilize it for now and wait until he became the emperor. At that time, it would be much easier to gather all the capable people in the world. He did not expect that Ning Anshuang, who had turned into a ghost, would be so powerful. She appeared and disappeared unpredictably and had strange abilities. Why should he make good use of it? Xiao Zijin suddenly calmed down. Ning Anshuang had countless chances to kill him, but she had never really been able to do it. She still could not bear to. If he asked her to help, she would definitely be happy. Ning Shu saw that Xiao Zijin's face suddenly glowed. He did not know what she was thinking, but her eyes were shining brightly and frighteningly bright. Xiao Zijin said to Ning Shu, if your sister appears, tell her to come find me. Ning Shu was speechless. Previously, he had always avoided her. Why did he take the initiative to meet her now? What was Xiao Zijin planning? Ning Shu said, Your Highness, I don't know when my sister will appear. Right now, her emotions are becoming more and more unstable. Your Highness should be careful. Xiao Zijin thought it through and expressed that the current Ning Anshuang was not scary at all. Just treat her as a person with special abilities and not a ghost. This feeling was much better. You don't have to worry about that. You just need to tell your sister. Xiao Zijin left the tent. Ning Shu sat down. Was Xiao Zijin going to cause trouble and use Ning Anshuang to cause trouble? However, it was not good for her to appear at this time. If she appeared, Ning Ani would disappear. He had to think of a way to let Ning Anshuang meet Xiao Zijin. Thus, the next day, Ning Shu said to Xiao Zijin, Sister is happy to hear that your highness is willing to meet. We'll meet tonight at the stream when the moon is above the treetops. There was a small stream some distance away from the encampment, so they agreed to meet there. A smile appeared on Xiao Zijin's face. I will definitely go tonight. Xiao Zijin looked at the bronze mirror in the tent and touched her face. She felt that she had become much uglier. In the past, he was very handsome. Chapter 2762. Xiao Zijin and Ning Shu agreed to meet at night. The place where they met was a small stream that was a little far from the station. Ning Shu changed his clothes and still had to reach the stream under heavy guards. Moreover, he had to come back quickly. Otherwise, he would be discovered that there was no one in the tent. Ning Shu performed a spatial jump and appeared in front of Xiao Zijin. When Xiao Zijin saw Ning Anshuang suddenly appear in front of her, her heart skipped a beat. Ning Anshuang, who didn't have any special abilities in the past, had become so powerful after death. This ability to appear and disappear unpredictably made Xiao Zijin have the urge to become a ghost. However, this impulse was quickly suppressed. What was the point of dying? There was no point at all. If one couldn't eat or drink and couldn't enjoy life, what was the point of struggling in life? Xiao Zijin was thinking that if she made the Netherworld Ghost Army and could appear and disappear unpredictably, wouldn't she be invincible? When Xiao Zijin thought of this, her heart suddenly burned with passion. Her entire body was trembling faintly. Since Ning Anshuang existed, then there must be other ghosts as well. If he used these ghosts, he could help him ascend to the throne. Moreover, after ascending to the throne, they could help him oversee the country. If he forced a minister into a house and had a ghost watching over him, he would be able to know what they were thinking immediately. For the first time, Xiao Zijin felt that Ning Anshuang's existence wasn't a bad thing. Everything had two sides. Perhaps she could turn a bad thing into a good thing. For the first time, she looked forward to Ning Anshuang's existence. The stronger Ning Anshuang was, the more valuable she was. Moreover, they had beautiful memories when they were alive. At that time, they were truly in love. That kind of sweetness was truly there. Ning Anshuang should be able to help him. Ning Shu saw that Xiao Zijin was staring at him with a fiery gaze. Her current makeup was rather scary. Why did Xiao Zijin look like a dog that had seen a meat bun? Ning Shu was vigilant in his heart, but he smiled and said to Xiao Zijin, "Jin Lang, you're finally willing to see me. Why are you looking for me?" Xiao Zijin stretched out his hand to hold Ning Shu's hand. Ning Shu took a step back and looked at him in confusion. "Jin Lang, why are you suddenly so close to me? Didn't you not want to see me before?" Xiao Zijin sighed. She knew that she had acted too impatiently. Even if he didn't have any feelings for Ning Anshuang now, she was someone who could help her achieve great things. "Shuang, I never wanted to be with you because I hoped that you could reincarnate and be reborn as a human. We humans and ghosts have different paths, and it will be difficult for us to be together." Ning Shu shook his head. "What's so difficult about that? As long as you love me and I love you, I'll stay by your side. Isn't this true love? Ghosts, snakes, aliens, as long as it's love, can they be together?" Across races, the more the person was not tolerated by the secular world, the more people would think of it as true love. A human and a ghost, they just couldn't clap for love. Could it be that love only had sex? Ning Shu's words were purely disgusting. Xiao Zijin's expression didn't look too good, but she still took a deep breath and said, "Shuang, I can't go with you right now. Hong is still young and no one is taking care of him. Do you really have the heart to leave him alone in this world? There's still my father's revenge. As a child, if I can't take revenge for my father, how can I see my parents in the underworld?" Ning Shu said, "Actually, I didn't see your parents in the underworld." Xiao Zijin, the atmosphere that had been brewing was completely ruined. Ning Shu didn't want to argue with him anymore. He wanted to go back and ask directly, "Jin Lang, what do you want me to do? Do you have the ability to control animals?" "Shuang, I need your help to take revenge for my father." Xiao Zijin's eyes lit up as she asked Ning Shu. Ning Shu pursed his lips. This guy really wanted to take advantage of the hunt to cause trouble. She also wanted to take advantage of the hunt to cause trouble. Now that the weather was warm, many animals had crawled out of their caves and were hunting for food. At this time, they were going to provoke these ferocious animals that had been hungry for the entire winter. Dying under the claws of these wild beasts was the most appropriate thing to do. Ning Shu nodded, Okay. As long as it's Jin Lang's matter, it's my matter. I'll definitely help Jin Lang do it." Xiao Zijin heaved a sigh of relief. She thought that she wouldn't agree. It seemed that Ning Anshuang still had her in her heart. Ning Shu asked, "Who killed father-in-law?" After Xiao Zijin's father died, her mother committed suicide. However, at that time, Xiao Zijin was already more than 10 years old and was already sensible. With the emperor taking care of her, she didn't live too miserably. Third Prince. Xiao Zijin investigated what happened back then and pointed the finger at the third prince. Even if it wasn't the third prince, the emperor was old and the underworld was turbulent. Soon, he wouldn't be able to suppress it. Moreover, the third prince had been looking for his faults recently. There were no peaceful days. Therefore, he had to get rid of the third prince. Ning Shu nodded, I can control animals, but you have to lure the third prince over. I'll think of a way to get the beasts over. Don't worry about that. Xiao Zijin nodded without thinking. No matter what method she used, she would lure the third prince into a trap. This uncle of his was really too annoying. Ning Shu's bloody mouth split into a smile as he said to Xiao Zijin, now that we're done talking about serious matters, Jin Lang, let's talk. Xiao Zijin immediately quivered. Facing such a face, she really wasn't in the mood to chat. She said, I'm going back to plan. After the matter is successful, we'll have a good chat. All right. Ning Shu said unwillingly and left with a spatial jump. Xiao Zijin was extremely envious. This kind of ability to appear and disappear like a ghost was both surprising and delightful. Ning Shu first returned to the camp's tent and changed into normal clothes. Then, he drank tea while using his spiritual power to scan the mountain range. Since it was Xiao Zijin's request, of course, he had to satisfy it. On the other hand, he found a big bug in the depths of the forest. This bug was quite big and very thin. It was obvious that it had starved during the winter. It was it. The next day, the hunt began. Other than the heirs of the royal family, there were also the sons of a family. There were roughly 100 of them. They were fighting in this forest. The women were all waiting in the camp, waiting for their sons to return. Xiao Zijin sat on the back of the horse and looked around. She wanted to know when Ning Anshuang would be able to control the beasts. Ning Shu sneaked away and ran to the place where the tiger was. He stretched out a small vine and wrapped it around the tiger. The tiger immediately let out a cry. The tiger roared in the forest, so its voice naturally traveled far. The tiger was tied up by Ning Shu and could not move. After a few more cries, even its mouth was tied up by the vines/BK. Chapter 2763. It was the tiger's voice. The hunters were all excited. The tiger was the king of the mountain. There was no beast more ferocious and majestic than the tiger in this forest. If they could hunt the tiger, they would definitely stand out from the crowd. Thus, the hunters began to look for the tiger. They didn't care about ordinary rabbits at all. They all began to look for the tiger. The tiger was tied up by Ning Shu and couldn't move. It looked at Ning Shu with its pair of eyes and tried its best to show its majesty to scare her to death. However, the fear in its eyes was very obvious. Xiao Zijin heard the tiger's roar and was delighted. This must be the beast that Ning Anshuang found. Third uncle, do you want to compete with your nephew to see who can find the tiger first? The third prince had a beard and looked a little old. He just smiled. I'm old. I'll leave things like fierce beasts to you young people. Coward. Xiao Zijin despised him in his heart and said directly, then I'll go look for it. Xiao Zijin urged his horse into the depths of the forest. He didn't believe that the third prince could stay calm. Although he said that he was old, the third prince was the most obvious target. To put it bluntly, the third prince was an impatient vanguard. He jumped out to target people and the ones who benefited were others. He had some brains, but his brain was limited. He didn't believe that he would miss the opportunity to make his grandfather pay attention to him. The third prince pursed his lips and said to the guard beside him, follow him. Yes. The guard chased in the direction of Xiao Zijin. Ao ao. There were a few more roars. Almost the entire camp knew that there was a tiger. The capital governor quickly sent some guards to guard the camp. If the fierce beast ran around and hurt the emperor and the noble ladies in the camp, He would have to quit being the capital governor. The old emperor's face and hands had age spots and his hair was white. However, he didn't step down from the throne. This made his sons and grandsons anxious. Even his grandsons were in their 20s. It could be imagined that this emperor could be considered to have lived for a long time. However, he was old and his spirit wasn't good. Under the care of the young concubines, he lay down to rest for a while. After lying down for a while, he was awakened by the tiger's roar. The people beside him quickly helped him up. The emperor frowned and looked very worried. Something might happen. However, the emperor relaxed his brows in the blink of an eye. As long as it didn't threaten the country, there would be someone from the Xiu family to inherit the throne. It didn't matter if one or two died. The emperor knew that he was a bit of a nuisance, but it was a bit difficult for him to generously give up his position. Therefore, even if he had to die on the throne. The older you get, the more you fear death. Xiu Zijin shuttled through the forest, looking for Ning Shu. Ning Shu sat on a tree branch and said to Xiu Zijin, who was under the tree, "Jin Lang, I found a big bug. What should we do now?" "Wait, control dumb insect first," Xiu Zijin asked the people around her to spread the news. Not long after, all the hunters received the news that Xiu Zijin had found dumb insect. She wanted to capture it alive and present it to His Majesty. Many people began to stir. This was a great opportunity to be in the limelight. When the third prince heard this, he hurriedly went to find Xiu Zijin. People from all directions rushed toward Xiu Zijin. This was Xiu Zijin's goal. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, she wanted the people who had harmed her parents to die under the claws of wild beasts. Their intestines were pierced and their stomachs were rotten. The capital magistrate felt bitter in his heart. He ordered the guards to step up their patrols and guard the camp well. As for the heroes who killed the tigers outside, they all had their family's servants by their side. Some of them were even people with profound martial arts skills. The appearance of the wild beasts made people's hearts heavy. They felt that something would happen. However, the emperor was still in the mood to drink tea and talk to a group of ministers. These ministers were worried about their family's sons, but the emperor didn't reply. That was because he had lived for a long time. Ning Shu loosened the vines that bound the tiger and drove it toward Xiu Zijin. Before this, Ning Shu had fed 2 rabbits to the tiger. The tiger's mouth was stained with blood. "Tiger, fuck, what do you want me to do?" Seeking benefits and avoiding harm was the instinct of living creatures to protect themselves. The tiger felt that once it went to the wrong place, its head would feel as uncomfortable as being pricked by needles. It hurt a lot. It could only run in the direction this human said. "There's a big bug." "What a big beast." The guards held long spears in their hands and pointed them at the tiger. Some of them were holding bows and arrows, ready to shoot at any time. "Your Highness, what should we do now? Our men here can't deal with the big bug." When Xiu Zijin saw the tiger, his heart beat faster. He was so excited that blood rushed to his head, causing his face to flush red. Especially when he saw that although the tiger was baring its teeth and looking like it was about to attack, it didn't attack. This made Xiu Zijin feel that he might be able to control the army of beasts. Ning Anshuang, who had returned from hell, had given him too many surprises. So what if she was a soul? In this moment of emptiness, many people rushed over. When they saw the big bug, they were all pleasantly surprised. Some impatient people directly started to shoot arrows. The tiger's reaction was very fast and directly dodged the arrows. The arrows were stuck in the ground and trembled. Roar, roar. The tiger lowered its head threateningly, revealing its sharp yellow teeth. It squeezed out a growling sound from its throat, threatening people not to come close. For the first time, the tiger felt that its life was so difficult. It slept in the cave, and then it was tied up. Then, it inexplicably confronted these people. The tiger had been a hunter before. The weapons in the hands of these people made it feel that there was no danger. But now that it ran away, its head would definitely explode from the pain. The tiger was annoyed and wanted to find a way to escape. The tiger's fast speed made the people who were eager to try calm down. If they provoked the beast, they might be bitten to death by the tiger. Xiao Zijin's eyes swept across the crowd. When he saw that the third prince had finally arrived, he immediately said in a clear voice, "Everyone, please make way. I found this tiger first. I plan to capture it alive and give it to my imperial grandfather." It was much harder to capture it alive than to kill it. At that moment, some people snorted. With so many people, it was easy to kill a beast, but the possibility of capturing it alive was very small. Moreover, this tiger was so strong, it might escape. "Zijin, it's not easy to capture it alive. Why don't I, as your uncle, help you kill it and then give it to the emperor? I heard that the tiger's skin is very warm." The third prince stroked his beard, looking righteous and caring for his nephew. The surrounding people silently retreated. It was obvious that this was a battle between the royal family. If they got involved and said something they shouldn't say, they might be unlucky. /BK You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.